And yet. Prompt, and thank you to everyone for being here on tonight. Call the meeting to order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Slovan is absent. Trustee Schechter, absent. Trustee Kamani Levy, here. Trustee Robinson, here. Trustee Iverson, here. Trustee Levy, here. Mayor Tenz.
Here, and we have a quorum. I will now turn the meeting over to John Lockerbie and Julian Prendy, who will provide an overview of municipal finances 101 for our edification, and an overview of the FY27 budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Tennis and Board. We're excited to be at this point. The budget process actually starts about 6 months into the fiscal year. And so back in November, Nick Wyatt, Assistant Village Manager, serves as the budget officer for the organization and really kicked off preparing the budget for consideration through the 4 hearings that we're having this year. And so we look forward to the budget hearings. And tonight we'll do an overview, talk about finances 101 for municipalities, and then we'll get into more detailed conversation. And so unfortunately, Nick is under the weather today, and so he is not able to be with us, but he sends his regards.
May the record reflect the trustee leadership.
And so the outline for tonight's presentation, Julian Prendy, Finance Director, and I will be co-hosting the presentation. So we're going to start out with the strategic goals, move into the Municipal Finance 101, and then we're going to talk about both revenues and expenditures for the proposed fiscal year budget, which is fiscal year 27. And then we will talk about the strategic enhancements for services and the associated new revenue that is required for those. So as you know, the past year has been quite the process of gathering input from the community, setting the strategic goals for the community. The village board has invested a great deal of effort and time in establishing the village's strategic plan. And so you will notice that this strategic plan is really the framework for the proposed budget. And so to highlight, there's 5 strategic goal areas. The first 3 are on the screen. The village services for now and the future are talking about data-driven public safety, enhanced staff recruitment. Everyone has a place in Skokie. The Youth Commission has already been created, starting to advertise that opportunity. We're working to meet residents where they are. We value accessibility. But community vibrancy is all-encompassing of having best practices in place, economic development, and working to update infrastructure. Now, the other 2 strategic goals are more about internal to the organization and how do we achieve the first 3. And so you'll recall great governance, talking about the model village board, having the well-designed ordinances, and working to implement the strategic plan. And so these two really are how we operate as an organization. And then the last strategic goal is financial stewardship. And so as we have talked about sustainable revenue, diversifying our revenue, the budget again reflects these conversations and the strategic goal that the board has announced. And so together, these 5 goals create the framework for our budget. Our intent is alignment so that we fund directly, our funding directly advances what the board identified as priorities. Now, this gets into a little bit more detail of strategic goals and action items that are reflected in the budget, as well as the costs associated with these items. And you'll be hearing about these through the conversations with the department directors when they're participating in the budget hearings. But just to highlight a few, and again, these aren't all of the action items reflected in the budget that align the strategic goals. This is just a few highlights. But talking about continuing our resurfacing program of 3 miles of streets, the village's lead service changeout program is significant. As you'll recall, we need to change 688 lead service lines a year. The village has determined the most cost-effective way to do that is to establish 2 crews within our Public Works Division. And so there is an addition of staff members, and you can see the cost associated with that. We want to continue to maintain our water transmission. And so we are analyzing our infrastructure and making improvements accordingly. Everyone has a place. We're able to move on to the next generation of 911, which will allow people that are calling in to our dispatch center needing public safety to respond, to be able to share photos, to text, to actually be able to show video, thus sharing it with the dispatchers that will ultimately be able to share it with the first responders. Please.
But if someone is in a situation where it's not safe for them to talk, they'll be able to talk.
That's correct. A real enhancement to the 911 services. We have a ADA self-evaluation process that is underway with a transition plan. This is a requirement, a legal requirement. We have both internal to the organization responsibilities as well as infrastructure with the community. And so we'll talk more in detail about this initiative, but it's not just the plan, it's the implementation of the plan. So you will see the ADA strategy for years to come. Adding a part-time fire inspector to assist in the inspection of the multifamily properties to ensure safety. Going to have an economic vitality strategy developed in the coming year. We've talked about the youth commission. We have a youth outreach coordinator that is not a full-time position. And so with that individual assuming responsibility for the youth commission, there is a budget impact to increase the hours necessary in order to fulfill the responsibilities of new commission. And then we have, we're looking forward to the strategic plan implementation and a dashboard. And so we are acquiring new software that will help track all of the different action items and be able to interface with the public to have an effective communication tool. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our finance director for the kind of the 101 municipal finance overview. And there'll be some 500 level concepts, but this is in response to the board asking for this. And so just an opportunity to talk in general policies before we get into the specifics of the expenditures and the revenue of the proposed budget. So Julian, the floor is yours.
Thanks. Thank you, John. Good evening all. So as John mentioned, this is intended to be brief and somewhat dense. It is, dry content. So I will stick to the script, but please feel free to interrupt with questions throughout. Most of the concepts covered here are topics and items that you will see through the budget hearing and the budget presentation related to funds and fund balance. So This is a summary of the financial policies that drive our budgeting and accounting services, and you can't start local government finance without talking about GAAP. That is the generally accepted accounting principles. It is essentially a set of rules, guidance, and policies that drive how we account for and present our finances. It is essentially a basic accounting and finance language in the United States. It does not apply just to municipalities. It goes to every entity in the US that presents financial reports. Some examples of what GAAP covers. It is how we account for revenue and expenditures. At what point at the end of the fiscal year must we cut off recognition of revenue and expenditure? For the general fund, and typically all governmental funds, that is about 60 days as a cutoff period. For enterprise funds like the water fund, that is the entire year. There is no cutoff period, essentially full accrual as opposed to modified accrual. These terms, modified accrual, full accrual, are both concepts in GAAP, and they again refer to that period of recognition at the end of the year. It also covered what types of financial reports we must present. If you spend any time looking at the audit, you will note that after my little brief summary, the financial statements are broken down by some government-wide type of information. These are called the government-wide financial statements, and they intend to compare us with a similar entity in the private sector. For our purposes, they're really not very useful unless you look at them in a year-to-year comparison form. We also present fund financial statements, which follow those governmental wide statements. Those are much more useful. That's typically where the budget and the audit can actually be connected if you look at those fund financial statements. It also guides how we present pension and debt and all other types of funds. Among one of the most important things GAAP demands is fund accounting, is how we separate the various funds that we maintain based on the purpose that they fulfill. I have listed here, first and foremost, the general fund. It is the primary fund that covers all general operation and staffing, not specifically assigned to another purpose. This is your police, fire, public works are all covered under the general fund. It's the largest fund we maintain and by some measure the most critical, again, because it funds those basic services we're here to provide. Besides the general fund, we maintain several special revenue funds. And special revenue funds essentially are funds where there's an external restriction or an internal assignment of resources that's connected to the purpose of that specific fund. Some examples, TIF funds are the most common, economic vitality, federal aid, visitors bureau, and so on and so forth. It's important to note that special revenue funds are silos. They essentially operate within their own bonds. They can do business and operate in connection with other funds, but their revenue is restricted to the purpose that they are created. I'll give you an example. When a TIF fund is created, it does not have resources from its primary purpose of development. Oftentimes, the general fund, the governmental fund, will loan a special revenue fund money to create that seat. That becomes a liability in the fund that must be paid back, debt essentially. But the point being that they can connect, however, their restricted purpose is to operate within their funds. Similarly for MFT, LFT, and economic vitality, as I mentioned there, those operate similar to TIFs where revenue is restricted either outside for MFT, internally for LFT to fund either road repairs or road resurfacing and so on and so forth. Yes,
Quickly, it can do the special funds. The money can be lent into them if when necessary, short-term needs, but can they lend money out the general fund?
they can, and by GAAP, they can. Practically, they don't. Typically, and we'll cover a little bit more of this when we talk about how we fund or allocation funding. We start with allocating revenue to the purposes that lead it, leaving the general fund for decisions. So typically, everything else is funded, and if we don't have enough funds for the general fund, we will make decisions before we get to that. So there's really never a need for a separate fund to loan funds to the general. In addition, the general fund is one of the only funds that maintains a reserve policy whereby it can cover revenue shortfalls or, severe long-term revenue attempts to cover for the lack of resources. Okay. Enterprise funds are another type of special fund. I list debt and pensions, but I will cover them a little bit in detail. Enterprise are funds that are operated similarly to a business. And in our case, we operate two of these funds. One is obvious, it's the water fund and runs as an enterprise as its own business. And in addition, we have a small parking fund that tracks revenue and expenses for the Swift North route. They're clearly separate from governmental funds, which is the general fund and the special revenue funds, in that the services provided must be funded by service charges paid by the customers of that enterprise fund. In the parking example, those parking fees go to fund the parking improvements at the terminals, sometimes the resurfacing of the lot. In the water, most clear example, water retail charges go to pay for every expense in the water. Debt service funds are a category of governmental funds, but a specific category. In the budget material and even sometimes in the audit, you will note one combined debt service fund. In essence, that for presentation only, we maintain 6 separate debt service funds, one for each debt service that we have issued, starting with the 2013 series all the way to the 2022 A and B series. The only activity through these funds are essentially the payment of principal and interest and the revenue allocation coming in to cover. There should be absolutely nothing else in the debt service fund other than the payment of debt. They do maintain reserves in case of revenue shortfalls to cover, in our case, next year in debt service payment. Pension funds are twofold or two type. Trust funds and agency funds. The village maintains both. As a trust fund, the village maintains the fire and police pension funds. And then as agency fund, the village maintains IMRF, which we'll discuss in a little bit. The police and fire pension funds are controlled by separately appointed boards. These are local boards, and I am a member of one of them, the fire board. They have one primary task that is the benefit administration. As of 2022, when the state actually enabled and passed the pension consolidation bill, all the assets of these funds have been consolidated into 2 state-controlled funds, essentially maintained by appointed and elected board that the governor. There's also representative from municipal and retirees. But the point is that the only control that the local boards maintain is over benefit administration. In both cases for Skokie funds, we have outsourced the accounting of the benefit administration to a local accounting firm, Lauterbach and Eamon. The board then is left with making decisions primarily over disability cases. So I would note that the village has some control when it comes to the trust funds, has some control over the funding levels. GAAP requires and sound finance policies require that actuarial analysis are conducted on an annual basis for police and fire pension funds. We engage outside firms to do those on an annual basis. However, we have some control over what assumptions these companies employ. Namely, the rate of increase of payroll over the next few years, or most importantly, the rate of return that we anticipate investments will bring over the next 10 or 15 years in the amortization period, the closed period that we're supposed to have these funded by. The village currently maintains very strict, very conservative funding policies for both police and fire. You may recall in 2022, we issued pension obligation bonds, actually boost the funding, and we have maintained these policies fairly conservative to allow us to actually stay on track with the funding target we have set. The state demands 90% by 2040. It's very likely that target will change as pension legislation moves through Springfield. We are still working towards that goal. Both funds are in the mid-80s, about 85-86% funded, and that percentage moves slightly year after year because of the recognition of revenues and expenses.
Trustee Boone.
What would happen if the state passes legislation to revert back to tier one funding for police and fire? What does that do to the overall health of these funds in particular and the general fund, general budget overall?
So we ran an analysis last year as this was picking up steam, and the summary result was that it would essentially wipe the work we did on the pension obligation bonds. We would have an immediate 1.5,
1.5, right.
1.5 million annual impact, and then between 6 and 1 million to increases in the going forward.
So kind of crisis mode if that happens.
Detriment.
Julian, I remember during the Great Recession, those funds, I think it was the Great Recession and then there were some pension sweeteners. Right, and so I'm pleased when you say they're at 80 and 85%, because we had been historically, Skokie, as I recall, had always taken great pride in being like nearly 100% funded.
Correct. And then 2002, 2003.
Right, and then it went down how low?
45.
Right, that's
46.
what I thought. So I think it's remarkable that the village is now back up. And how does that compare with peer communities? Do you have any sense?
We are much better funded than peer communities when it comes to the police and fire pension boards, pension funds, because of that work we did through the pension obligation, where we essentially took the outstanding liability that we were paying 7.25% on, refinanced it through general obligation debt, paid 3%, saving net present value just under $40 million. But yeah, if the state, moves the goalpost and changes the rules, that would wipe our.
So another quick question, John, this might be for you. Would you remind us, Julian alluded to before, that these boards, the separate fire pension board and the police pension board, it's not like a typical village board or commission. I think we have some appointment authority, but the retirees have a seat and the active unions have, or the police have. So how does that work?
By state statute, the membership of the pension boards is established. And so maybe you want to speak to.
Correct. So the state statute demands that 2 members must be from active membership, which is the
Yeah.
fire, firefighters and lieutenants and so on. 2 members must be from the municipal appointed members. So the mayor typically appoints 2 of them. One of them traditionally is the treasurer of the fund. That is one of the appointees is myself in the fire pension. Another is a Skokie resident.
Is that Dan Ryan who does the other?
There's Dan Ryan on police
Okay.
and Jeff Creasy.
Dan Ryan is a former Skokie resident, former village finance director.
Sound like a great resource. And then the 5th member is essentially a retired.
Thank you.
I mentioned agency funds. The Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund is our 3rd pension plan. Agency means that another entity maintains it, controls it, essentially sends us a bill annually. In the case of IMRF, a state board oversees their investments. They oversee the benefit administration. The disability awards are much stricter on the IMRF side because they're very strict state law rules for the IMRF pension. But they run their own actuarial at the beginning of the year, and they know what the funding need will be. They calculate a percentage of payroll that we're required to pay. They get that to us at the beginning of the year. Each month we remit essentially whatever our payroll is times that to be around this division. It is the best funded state pension. There were several years it exceeded 100%, 22, 23, 24, I believe, and it is now just below 100%. It was part of the driver behind the pension consolidation bill. It's success. As we talk about the various policies that are driven by gap, fund balance and long-term planning are among the most important. The village maintains fund balance policy for with a stated target for the general fund and the debt service funds. Our target for the general fund is 25%, and the debt funds is 100%. This is not a new concept. We've discussed this in the past. These reserves are the only insurance policy that the village has against economic downturns, both acute or drawn out, like it was in the case of the pandemic. We are very reliant on economically sensitive sources. 75% of the general fund could be considered economically sensitive. And through our annual budgeting process, we are always future focused. We plan out 10 years ahead, at least map out expenses and revenues 10 years ahead. And we look at that reserve policy, how it will serve us, not just this year, but also 10 years down the road. So our available reserves are currently at 50% in the general fund and just shy of 100%, mid-90s in the debt service fund. But I do want to point out, reserves are nothing more one-time revenue. They are sources that today we are thankful to have on hand because of the ARPA infusion of cash through the COVID pandemic. I think 15 million was just handed to us by the federal government. We used some of it, a good chunk of it, about 13 million to pay for public services, and that allowed us to capture some sales tax revenue that flowed and set it into reserve, not knowing what would happen with the pandemic. And then the 2021 legislative change on sales taxes gave us extra sales tax revenue when we were not anticipating in 21 and 22. We'll talk more a little bit later on. But those are essentially the two events that have allowed us to come up with this unbalance. It has been relatively between 45 and 50% in the last couple of fiscal years. As you'll see later on in the discussion of the projections, we plan to dip on that on an annual basis because of our structural imbalance of revenue.
Trustee Schechter. Yeah, I'm just curious in terms of, and I understand that when we have a excess revenues that you're saying is sort of a one-time thing, but is there a way that at least the village, that we as a board can get updates as to how much, because, I know what, even just seeing maybe raise more, for example, the sales tax and budgeted, where does that money go? How do we decide? I know some other municipalities, and Evanston was looking into the excess reserve policy fund, a policy around that.
And I know you had raised that,
Right.
the question. I did some research to look and see what was out there as far as reserve policy. I did not, I did not have a whole lot of time to dig into it. I didn't find any municipalities, at least in our size or region, that maintain an excess reserve policy. Larger counties, Cook County, for example, has one, which have much more resources and much bigger reserves, even though the percentages are lower. They typically will set a ceiling on their reserves. Cook County does, has a floor and a ceiling. And they specify that any amount over the ceiling can go to pay one-time expenses like large capital or debt. And that is not, it's not, that makes sense. It flows. The issue and the reason why we have not pursued it is because we have experienced two revenue events in the next 10 years. We are concerned that the next one will require, if, our projections with no change to revenue for the next 10 years, didn't that fund balance annually to the 10? Now, this year, we don't go down to zero because, as we discussed during the December tax levy, we are projecting to capture some EAV growth. As the EAV grows, we're projecting to capture some of that, and we're incorporating that. So it keeps us above zero, below target, but our structural deficit is there.
So I just wanted, so you're saying that the excess that we may be receiving is going kind of into a rainy day sort of fund, or, I mean, I'm just feeling like, I think it's just good to know
So it doesn't go, it just stays in the general fund as unbanked. So what you see here as the today, the 49%. It is essentially revenue that was collected that was not anticipated. It's just, it's become our insurance policy for revenue dips and structure.
Couple of things. I agree with trustee Schechter. I think that might be an interesting policy, although I do remember, and help me guys, wasn't it the Great Recession where am I remembering that our fund balance went down to 17 or 18%?
Yes, and then there is a second in the presentation, we will cover that.
Okay. So but I agree. I think at some point, when it gets to a certain amount, maybe we should have a policy and it should be up to the board upon a recommendation by the manager. Like, let's resurface some more streets next year. Let's do something. John, what are your thoughts? Or trustee Elizabeth?
Well, that seems like a really great case for participatory budgeting, right? So if we get to a certain amount that triggers spending down, then that seems like letting the communities decide between resurfacing streets, increasing garbage pickup, more water main, like what is our community?
I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. I think we've been elected to make those decisions, and I think they told us through the strategic plan. So I'm not saying we wouldn't do that, but I think that's a much larger conversation. I'm just thinking, on a recommendation from the village manager, and John, I'm thinking you would, yeah.
And that's really what we do through the budgeting process. The difficulty after 08, 09, when we had to spend down, climbing back out was 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And so there's a tendency when we get above the stated threshold to think that it's too much, but our stated threshold, and that we should spend it, but our stated threshold is pretty conservative. And so we are talking about how our revenue is based on the economy. And so when the economy dips, our revenue dips, but our ability to control our expenditures is really at personnel. We'll talk, personnel is about 80% of the budget. So the only real way to save money is a hiring freeze or to lay employees off. Historically, the organization has had a philosophy and policy of no layoffs. And so it was through the hiring freeze. So it started in 08. Here we are in 2026, proposed 2027 budget. And even with adding the number of positions that are being added, we're still down 29 positions from 08. And that's an annual savings of 2.3 million. And so we're not able to sustain our services. We talk about wanting to do ADA transition plan and, add a youth commission and different new initiatives. And we're still behind from 08 levels, 29 positions. And so the excess really gets allocated to one-time expenditures because we can't structurally depend on the rainy day fund for ongoing personnel expenses. And so it really comes down to capital, and the annual cost of maintaining our fleet is in excess of $2 million. Many people have commented recently that, the village hall looks a little tired, that maybe some of our facilities beyond village hall may not have enough space, or maybe they need to be relocated. And so there's a lot of long-term issues that are swirling around. And if we start to spend down that rainy day fund, we don't have it in an emergency, when the economy crashes, or there's a pandemic or whatever the case may be. And so I think the reason that most municipalities don't have an excess policy is it really is driven by a sensitivity to what's on the horizon for the next 10 years. What are the needs, the one-time needs of a municipality? And that's really what we evaluate through the budgeting process. And so it's really when a ladder truck is going to cost $2.5 million, There's significant expenditures. But when ComEd decides that, the way that we're using the largest part of the public works yard is no longer acceptable for storage under transmission lines, we have to determine how do we maintain leaf collection and some of those services that we provide that we are using the ComEd right of way for storage. And we're in a built out community, so it's not easy to access land. And so there's so many of those. Please,
Just that,
yes.
to the funding. So tie that to, okay, so there.
So this-
there we-
So this year, within the last few months, ComEd and the staff have been talking about there need to be changes with how the ComEd right of way is used at Public Works. And so the Public Works facility utilizes the land that is ComEd right of way in order to have enough space to do what they do. So ComEd is now telling us we can no longer use that. So we don't have space to take those items and store them elsewhere. So then we're faced with, can we convince ComEd that we can figure out a solution? Or do we have to rent space? Do we have to buy land? Do we have to build a facility? Do we need to relocate? And so the fund balance, if we're fortunate enough to have one-time payments, in the recent past, two significant ones, that allows us to be a little bit flexible. And if we start to think that we need a policy that as soon as it gets to a certain threshold that it needs to be spent down, we lose the flexibility to problem solve for unanticipated changes, which is why I brought up ComEd. We've been using it for decades. And now in the last year, it's a problem. And so how do we solve that problem? And it's not something it wasn't in the annual budget and it wasn't in the 5-year CIP. And so, we're exploring all kinds of options. But that reserve fund is so important. And many municipalities, we talked about this last year, many municipalities that are so dependent upon revenue tied to the economy, like us, have a higher threshold of fund balance. And so, if we go down a path of saying, okay, if we're in excess, this is how it's treated, as opposed to evaluating it in the 5-year CIP and the annual budgeting process, then that fund balance policy needs to be revisited too.
So you're saying that it is, even though we don't have that policy, what we're saying is that when it gets over 25%, that whatever that increment is during the capital improvement project discussions, you and the group talk about where those excess funds could be directed. Is that correct?
We do that on an annual basis.
Okay.
If there's large need for cash to fund one time, perfect example, several years ago, we were given the option to prepay for 3 fire apparatus because of the delays in production. It took 4 or 5 years. And we would save some 130,000, I don't know, or 150,000, a large sum, kind of prepaid. We were fortunate enough to do that because we had available reserves while still not compromising our 25% target. We were able to push some reserve to prepaid agreements. And we will do some research to find out what's out there. We'll continue to do that review and see if there's a policy that reads well, that still allows staff flexibility while continuing to work.
Yeah, trustee Schechter, and then we're gonna move on.
Oh, yeah. And I think I'm not disagreeing at all with any of this. It's just it's just knowing. I think it's just the knowledge that, okay, there are these excess funds, this is the amount, this is what's happening with it.
But to be clear, they're not saying they're excess funds. I mean, at what
Well,
point
beyond the budget.
will be on the budget? So I guess one of the questions I would have is 25% enough? Is that a big enough threshold?
That's not.
So then do we
Yeah,
need a
that's the
policy?
question.
So then, right now you say we're at 50%? Do we need a policy that puts that based on the fact that our revenues are so dependent on the economy, maybe 25% isn't an appropriate fund balance level.
Right.
And there's so many different levers because, you've identified that as a goal to diversify the revenue.
Right.
And so that's part of what's before the board in this budget. So there's so many different ways to continue to keep us financially strong. And so if we become less reliant on the economy, perhaps 25% fund balance is sufficient. But at this moment in time, it's not. I mean, through what we've experienced in the last, since '08, and how long it took us to build it back up, we didn't have a rainy day fund if there was a second one soon after the
It was
first.
that really was a very troubling time because our fund balance went low, we had a no layoff policy. You know, the village manager then, and I believe the village manager now and the board, took very seriously the obligation to our employees and their families, so there was a no layoff policy. But I remember those charts, and it was dire, what was gonna happen if the economy didn't rebound. What was gonna happen to this organization?
I think that really gave us a very important piece of information tonight, like, I didn't realize that municipalities that are so dependent on the economy really need to have so it puts the whole Evanston question to me perspective, because they're very reliant on property tax.
Right.
But that's a whole different kind. So you've answered the question.
As is often the case, Skokie, other, we always learn lessons from our neighbors, but every municipality has their own unique set of services.
Very true.
Good discussion.
Real briefly, I include here our capital policy for, perhaps the board is aware, our policy to fund capital has been cash basis for equipment, supplies, and minor improvements to real property, and only reserve debt for assets with a 20+ year of life. So this has been both, an achievement and at times a burden as we prepare the capital plan year after year. We fund cash where we need to. So equipment, as I mentioned, the fire apparatus, it's typically based on our allocation funding model. And then when we do, as we have in the past, we have issued debt to build buildings. This addition that we're standing on, that we're sitting, was built through the 2014 debt series that has since been retired. I touched upon the allocation model, and I will say, outside of the special revenue, we're left with the general fund, the capital fund, debt service funds, and pensions. And in order to fund these priorities, we employ this allocation model that essentially prioritizes those funds or those needs for which we do not have control. And that typically starts with pensions and debt. As we meet those obligations, then we move down to capital. And finally, we end with the general fund where we have the most levers to pull. Management has the most flexibility in the general fund as to what like John mentioned, hiring freeze or, the capital fund to hold on purchases and so on. So that has been the model we've employed for years. It has allowed us the flexibility to quickly adapt as part of our successfully handling both the COVID pandemic and the 2008, 2009 recession. And then lastly, our budgeting process, perhaps the most familiar to the village board, especially now after discussing the strategic plan for many weeks. The annual process spans many months and involves many staff across the departments. It requires the balancing and coordination of our community needs, board policies and priorities, available revenues, mandatory funding demands, general service provisions, outside pressures like unfunded mandates and pensions, and then any new expanded efforts and initiatives. As John mentioned, this tonight is the culmination of this many months of process. With that, I will jump straight into the overall revenues unless there's questions. This should be familiar to the presentation last year. We'll spend a little time talking about the overall revenue picture of the village. We'll look at some specific historical revenues. We'll discuss fund balance projections and then spend just a little time talking about the impacts on the water rates based on our anticipated expenditures, both operationally and capital. I talked about this allocation model and I wanted to find a chart that depicts what that means. I don't know that this is the perfect chart, but bear with me as I walk you through this. In total, the revenue for fiscal 27 amounts to just shy of 182 million. I should note that includes about 5 million of anticipated reserve utilization on certain funds, and I'll cover a little bit more of it. But as we discussed, the various fund types are represented here. Starting from the left, these stacks essentially are funds and fund types. The general fund with the 77.9 revenue, moving on to special revenue with 11.2, and then debt service, capital projects, water fund for enterprise, the pension funds, and then self-insurance, which I really didn't touch, but it fits into a special smaller category called internal service. Oftentimes you'll see IT and insurance built as a internal service fund where essentially they charge other funds for the services they provide. That's how we run this. So insurance. The various colors you see here are funding sources. The most prominent is that green, which is taxes as a general category, followed by licenses and permits, fines, service charges, and so on. Each stack represents 100% of that figure that sits on top of it. And the colors represent how we get to that 100%. You'll see that the taxes that are generally collected through the general fund allocated out to fund all of these various funding priorities or purposes. As an example, 11.2 million of the 16.2 million property tax goes to fund the debt service. It says dedicated to fund the repayment of debt. The capital projects fund is funded by a 7 million transfer of home rule sales taxes. And so on and so forth. The special revenue gets a portion of tax, primarily hotel, transfer taxes, and so on. But hopefully this kind of depicts this allocation model that we don't hold taxes in one silo, but essentially allocate them out to fund the various purposes, which is again, what provides the greatest flexibility for staff. This chart is a little more traditional. I think you saw this same breakdown last year. The total new revenue is 176.7 million. And I mentioned that figure is different from the prior slide because of the 5.some million fund balance utilization. And specifically for fund balance, 2.7 million of that comes in the water fund. The capital, and we'll talk more about this, the capital and operational expenses in the water fund exceed the available revenue we think we can raise this year. So we are programming a portion of that fund balance to fund capital consistent with the policies of one-time expenditures. 1.3 million of fund balance is being expended in the Economic Vitality Fund to fund again capital improvements. And then we maintain a pension stabilization fund that we issued at the time we issued the pension obligation bonds. The intent of that fund was to stabilize funding into the pension and police pension funds. So we are now drawing down that fund slowly annually in order to increase the amount we put into the pension funds in anticipation of changes at the state and in order to maintain a high funding level. But back to this chart, it should not come as a surprise. Sales taxes, the single largest source of revenue, 24% of the total revenue that fund all of the village's budget come from sales taxes. That is astronomical amount of $42.9 million. Followed a close second by service charges, and I should note 80% of that service charge figure is water revenues. The water retail charges that go to fund the water. There are some smaller service charges in there, like on the general and so forth. I'm not going to go through every single category. Feel free to interrupt with questions. I do want to point out property taxes at 16.2 million. That is, essentially 9% of the total budget. That 16.2 million, you'll recall, is the amount that we approved at the December 2025 levy, including the increase to fund that expiring firefighter safer grant as an additional position for the year. As we come up in December of 2026 for another levy, we will discuss how we best capture EAV growth through another proposal for 2026. I'll note, moving further down, income taxes at 12.2 million. It has become through the years, another very reliable and major funding source for operations. Currently is dedicated 100% to the general fund. I bring it up, because it is a very, easy source for the state to grab. This is what the state essentially, cut in half for the village in 2011. As we were, discussing getting out of the recession, the state through the local government distributed fund cut our share of income taxes that were distributed from 10% down to 6%. And that was a 50% cut in the revenue we received. So currently just over 6%. I'll touch a little more on this as we look at income taxes specifically. I do want to note other taxes in this chart includes smaller local taxes like amusement, we'll discuss later, packaged liquor, personal property replacement tax, another small source that comes from the state. And then other revenue as a category, just to make that a little more clear, that is mostly pension contributions from employees, and then the internal charges from that insurance fund, from other funds to go pay the insurance fund. The fee in lieu in the housing fund is also included in that other revenue. Similar but different, this is a chart that focuses only on the general fund, just shy of 80 million in revenue anticipated for the general fund. Again, the number one funding source, sales and use taxes, and that is 99% sales and 1% use tax. And that use tax is the 6.25% that usually end users have to pay that did not pay the retail tax. As presented and through the budget process, you have seen this figure: 75% of the general fund is funded by sources that are sensitive and tied to the economy. This is in addition to the state threats mentioned. We have discussed, strategically boosting or moving away from economically sensitive sources, and when not possible, to essentially diversify even more the revenue sources that is. Service charges in the general fund for various cost recovery, the refuse fee is included in there, police details, and so on. For fiscal 27, I do want to note revenue from other agencies that essentially is grants. It only includes some revenue, grant revenue anticipated for the health department, small grant revenue for the police department, and then the Lincolnwood dispatch contract funds. It does not include, unfortunately, the 390,000 in safer monies that we attempted to re-up for 4.6.
And those, that's for the 3 firefighting positions,
That we have now incorporated.
right, and we are now.
I'll just, the next 3 or 4 slides just focus on these, key revenue sources, and no surprise, sales taxes is front and center. The chart illustrates total sales taxes collected by month, starting in January of 2020, all the way through December of 25, and we're limited to available data. That's why we end in December here. So the stacks are months, and the line is essentially a 12-month running average, which represents a trend for us here. So as you can see by this data, the revenue normalized in the center right there. The annual revenue normalized to about between 1.9 and 2.5%, depending on how long of a time span we look at. The longer you go, the lower that percentage. The shorter, in the past 10 years, we're looking at a 2.5 annual trend on the sales taxes. Beginning in January 21, as I mentioned, state changed the law. The Amazon sales were not subject to sales tax. We got an infusion of sales taxes, and we received 37.8 in 21 to 22 and 17.8 year-over-year increases in 21, 22, 22, and 23. By contrast, 23 and 24 were much more down to earth, 3.28% and 2.28%. Based on that trend last year, we anticipated a fiscal 26 budget that was trend, essentially 2%. And then we were shocked in 2025 when that trend started dipping upward, which can only be explainable by the tremendous increase in pricing thanks to the tariff policy of the federal government. We experienced a year-over-year 25 to 24, 16.1%. So with that information, we essentially revised the base for fiscal 27. We raised the base of revenue. We applied our traditional trend. And answer to your question as to how we come up with 5.2 million, the base went up, and then we assumed the trend with 2% that we assumed.
Trustee Lisley, so if the tariff policy is deemed illegal.
Which
what
was
happens- Right, so what happens to those tax revenues collected by us? Do we have to then return them?
We do not, no, our sales taxes are collected over gross receipts. Now, whether someone will have to pay those tariffs back still remains a question. There are interpretations at the federal level that they can use a different section of the federal code to apply the tariff policy and yet maintain the available tariffs. I don't know, I'm not an expert. I could say that no one will come to the village and say you overtax. We follow applicable law, we tax on those receipts, there's really nothing going back. Where that money can be tied to a specific tariff, the tariff portion of it could possibly be due to a refund at the federal level, either to a company or to consumers.
Good question.
So I guess that.
Trustee Iverson, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, just that, yeah, this is all in the courts right now. And they'll deal with major issues first. But the likelihood that they will ever be able to unwind the complexity there is.
It's water under the bridge now. It's gonna be there.
In theory, there could be a refund, but it's just. Yeah, but it's the fascinating thing, isn't it?
Suffice it to say, we do not anticipate a 16% jump in 27 to 26. This, again, we've been fortunate enough to experience these one-time events, and this really surprised us. The level of increase was a bit.
Trustee Jackson.
But just a question, and so of course my mind jumps to Westfield. And we have the fund there, does that mean
It's a 1% tax.
the 1%?
It's the business district.
Fixed, and it doesn't matter.
It's a 1%, but as you'd expect, even that 1% during this past year was valued higher than it would have been had we not had tariffs.
But there is an agreement in place that once the dollar figure is reached, then the business district terminates. And so it doesn't matter,
It's 23.
But
It's a tip.
but if they reach the dollar figure before then the business district terminates.
We reimburse them on a monthly basis. They have expended 67+ million in the property. So we have not reimbursed them, but the business district has not collected. So on a monthly basis, we'll reimburse them whatever the bid produces. So once that reimbursement is complete.
Whether it's at the 23-year mark or before.
Really quick,
Yeah, sure.
it's on the subject of our reserves and how we manage it.
Please.
The fact is, this is, a happy chance card in Monopoly where you actually make money, but it could just as easily spill the other direction. And, that was an abrupt shot. It should have been an abrupt shock to everybody. And, this is reality for at least another country. And so I think this on the subject of reserves. I feel like conservatism is
The pendulum can swing both ways.
easy.
Absolutely, and you can see at the beginning on the left side of that chart, we have not lost the history of the pandemic. That trend has gone. Food and beverage, I include the food and beverage tax because it was one of the most successful local sources that, again, we implemented back in 2015 in response to revenue shortfalls, our diversifying need. Hit pretty hard during the pandemic, well, not the hardest, but you can see that trend line dipping through 2020 and 2021. It has been a relatively stable producer of revenues for the village. We anticipate about 5.2 million this year in 2026, and are projecting just shy of 5.4 for fiscal 2027. Not very little cyclical nature to this, it appears, a little bit of spikes in the summer and the warmer months, but it's not as abrupt as you can see on the income tax at each April or sales tax at each December. But this is a little more stable. very reliable tax source.
What happened in January of 24? I feel like I asked this last year.
That was a correction on unfiled, I think related probably to several months earlier. It was not, there was not a one, there was no crazy restaurant event at the time. I think it was just an account.
Like a correction from August or something.
I believe so. The worst hit revenue source during the pandemic was, hands down, the hotel tax. You can see, the dip was actually 77% lower than the taxes high of 2.3 million prior to the pandemic. I'm happy to announce that we have almost achieved that 2.3 million level back. We anticipate 2.1 in fiscal 26 and projecting 2.2 for fiscal 27. But again, another source that funds both the general fund portion and the Visitors Bureau, as well as the Performing Arts Center.
Julian, why the gap for April 25?
Alex had asked that very astute question earlier, so that is also a gap required accounting change in April. We had reported higher revenue in the prior year and made a correction, which essentially zeroed out that. It was recorded in April, so it looks like. And just for context, the village maintains a 7.5% hotel tax rate in conjunction with our Visitor Bureau partners, which vary, one is lower, so.
And when that, it was at 3.5% prior to the CBB. And the hoteliers, we brought the hoteliers in and said we were, this was in 2002 or 1, that we were not going to form the Convention Visitors Bureau unless they agreed to fund it through a hotel tax increase, and they did. So.
I mentioned the income tax. I wanted to depict for you how it has performed for us over the last 5 years, again, on a monthly basis. The spikes are April, filing deadline. The structure right now is the state shares 6.47% of the personal income tax. In a slight reduction of the corporate income tax, but in the 6-point-something range. There are rumors in Springfield that the governor is proposing through fiscal 27 here to reduce that from 6.47 to 6.28%. Now, municipal governments, our lobby efforts, all of our partners, our organizations that represent us have fought for years, since 2011, essentially relentlessly, to restore the funding from the low 6% where we are right now to the 10%, which incidentally was established in 1969 when the income tax was implemented. And as the selling point to the municipality, the state said you cannot implement a local income tax because we will give you 10% of the state's share. And then in 2011, they turned around and we're at 15%. If that proposal, and I've also heard there's proposals for the legislature that would actually cut the percentage even lower. If the governor is successful, that's a 400,000 hit to the village of Skokie. We are not incorporating it in the budget. Again, it's one of those things that the fund balance will address this year. Going forward, if it becomes a permanent, then we will need to discuss revenue sources to address that concern. But at this point, it's too early. It is too esoteric to actually consider this. As promised, our fund balance discussion, we talked about the 25% target. We talked about fiscal 27, and the 50% figure is what we project at the end of fiscal 27, Trustee Schechter, and that includes the infusion that we ended up fortunate to receive with this year's sales taxes. So we project our revenue and expenses based on known trends. Again, we don't want to play with this. The reliability of this chart is in the assumptions we put in there. We don't want to play with them. We don't put any, certainly no unfunded mandates and no new revenue sources that are not known to us today. So we take our trend growth in expenditures and revenues, we project it out, and this is what it looks like. If everything came to fruition as we think, we would dip annually. We have an annual structural deficit where our expenditure growth rate outpaces the revenue growth rate on an annual basis. So by fiscal 35, I apologize, the numbers are very low. That's the first red stack. We would be below the 25% target. And by the 10-year end, we'll be just at 16%. So this is what drives the need for flexibility for the village when we project these out. But again, interesting.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Trustee Shagna. It just hit me, that we're doing this chart. Have we thought of doing, juxtaposing it with another chart that would say just how much would our like theoretically, would our economy have to grow in Skokie? So let's say, the investments that we make through the tip, through economic vitality, like just sort of not a hypothetical, but setting for ourselves some benchmarks and targets for growing the economy as a way
To meet the general fund spending need, what would need to be produced.
What would be-
from
yeah.
different sources. That's a great point. We could do that. It would be an academic exercise. We would have to pick,
right.
some assumptions there, but yeah, that's again, the geek in me loves stuff like that. We'll put something together.
Yeah, I think that would be very interesting. Thank you
Yeah.
for the suggestion.
And then again, just a reminder, I know we mentioned this in the past, but in the last 15 years, we have not experienced two revenue events with the recession and the COVID pandemic. I thought I had the percentage that we dropped to, but it was in the mid-teens, I think 16 or 17.
16 or 17%.
Through the recession, the fund balance. Below, it was in the single zones.
It was 7 or 8 million. Yeah, it was low. When you think about the value of payroll every 2 weeks, it gets very,
The big engines.
Yeah.
Push.
So our annual payroll is 55 million. And the fund balance of just shy of 50% is right below 35. In total, village expenses, 25% will only cover us again for 3 months and 50% for 6 months. Comfortable metrics to give us flexibility to do what we need to do in the revenue environment. The average among towns, I do want to know the average among towns with heavy reliance on sales taxes is 40%.
So can we stop for just a second? What would we, and maybe this is more of a question for Barb and John. What would be the process for changing our policy from 25% to 50% or whatever?
it would be a policy decision of the board.
But do we need, would we need to codify it? I mean,
We don't have it codified presently, that's.
Okay.
The policy of the board in connection.
so what would the mechanism be? Would this be something at a village board meeting?
I believe in the past, I don't know whether our rules require this, but certainly the GFOA to maintain the award presentations requires a resolution.
Oh, okay.
So it would be a staff recommendation followed by a resolution action.
Yeah. John, is that something that you would recommend? Do you want to think about it a little bit and give us a memo?
Sure. No, I think it's a good issue to,
Okay.
To analyze.
Just
Yes.
told them we
No,
can't
I-
take action tonight.
yes.
But yeah, if you some thought
Sure.
and maybe sometime over the summer, give us a memo and we can take a look at a resolution.
Talking about the fund balance target.
Yep.
Yep. Okay.
And great.
Right, it would be a no to the audit. Jay,
Well, the audit would just essentially, as it outlines our policies, it would
Right.
just update it on the next check.
Right.
The only caveat to this would be having a higher target. And could potentially expose us to not meeting the target because as the general fund increases, now there's a higher amount that you need to set in reserves to get to that.
Right.
So there perhaps is a level where the heavy meeting exists.
That's why I was suggesting that.
Now is-
Think it over and then come to us with it. Maybe 50%.
And we'll do some research to see what.
Maybe it is 42%, 42.5, whatever. You'll decide. Thank you. Oh, sure,
That's unexpected, budget. Yeah, I only because I'm looking at another fund reserve policy here and they equated to, they put a percentage or X number of months. Do we ever look at it that way, that ideally we want X number of months in reserve?
At the
Payroll,
time,
or,
so
you know.
yes, at the time, it was 25% finance. That was back in, maintaining basic services, paying bills. The way our expenses have grown, we're now. So to get closer to that 5 months, we're now at 6 months, obviously with 50%, but. It's not stated in the policy, trustee, but we've always looked at it.
Thank you.
And as mentioned, just real briefly on the water fund. In total for fiscal 27, we are projecting revenues at 23.3 million. That is assuming a 14.9% increase to the retail rate, which really equates to $1.14 increase per 100 cubic feet, or a minimum bill increase, a quarterly minimum bill of 11.39, up to 87.82. Now, even with this 14.9 increase, we are still unable to meet the full expense obligation of the water fund. That would require approximately a 2.7 million in reserve utilization for fiscal 27. That reserve, as I mentioned, would go towards that 14.5 million capital figure. That 14.5 million, John, I'll cover that in a little bit, it is essentially lead lines, water mains, and some ancillary services, so predominantly hard capital. But fortunately, even with that 14.9, we still remain one of the lowest water rates in the area. I'll show you the chart that we the slide that we update year after year, looking at our comparable communities. We are the green stack as the coast, so that 87, 82 still would be third lowest in our area. And the various colors here mean the different components of the water rate that our neighbors charge. You'll note every single town charges both water, sewer, fixed fees, and or some sort of stormwater charge. So water's in blue, sewer's in maroon, plain gray for fixed fees, and then the pattern is the storm. So the village still remains the only one that charges what I think is the most transparent, flat rate to fund all of our water fund expenses, both capital and operating.
And it's based on usage, other
It's
than
based
there
on
is that minimum bill,
But
whereas a sewer charge is fixed.
it could be both. Some of these are based on usage. Lincolnwood, for example, has a debt service charge that is fixed. Some sewer charges are based on 1,000
Usage.
gallons or 1,000 cubic feet. It could be structured to the way.
Any questions on this? Do you see, I do have a question. Do you see us projecting out? Do you see continued recommendations for increases? Double-digit increases, yeah.
Well, the short unfortunate answer to that is yes.
For how long?
So the last time we ran multi-year projections, call for increases in the 9 to 10% range for at least 5 to 6 years.
And would you, and again, I just want to be clear, this is necessitated because of increased capital demands on our aging system.
Right, our aging water mains require an annual increase in both main miles we cover to get to that 3 miles. And the cost of replacing each main mile has gone tremendously higher from the prior 5 years.
Thank you. Oh, trustee
And
Iverson.
water's also lead lines, right?
Correct, so lead lines is one of the major increases this year. It actually doubled from last year. John will cover more on that. Yeah, about 5 point some million of that 14 million is all that.
If we go up 10% a year for the next 5 years, we're still gonna look pretty good on that chart.
That is It is my,
When other towns get their water bill, they don't get a separate bill for sewer, do they? It's all on the same bill.
it's all on the same bill in Cook County, yes. In other counties, you have district that charge for sewer, but no, Cook County.
Yeah, that's it. So they're seeing the number.
Everyone you see here in the slide, just before, is actually a combined bill. Yes, both waters.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're gonna switch to expenditures, give your revenue side of your brain a little break. So as we move into expenditures, we start with by fund. And so as we've talked about, the general fund is the largest fund. That's our operation at 76 million annually. We also have our pension funds at 27 million and includes police, fire, and Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund. And then the water fund at 26 million is the third largest, and that's to buy water from Evanston to maintain our infrastructure and to provide the services. And it's also including stormwater. And so any improvements that we do underground related to sewer, stormwater, water is all included in the water fund. The general fund includes all of our departments. As you can see, police, fire, and public works are the largest three departments. And so they make up a significant portion of the budget. I should have mentioned on the previous slide, the total budget is 192 million, and then our general fund makes up the 77 million. As we look at the variety of these pieces of pie, each department director will be coming and meeting with you, a chance to hear from them on highlights from the past year, what's on the horizon, and any questions or areas of interest for you. I should note that the organization, the $190 million budget, has a contingency of $50,000. And so it's not a
So low.
it's not a large contingency.
You guys are so hard to balance the numbers. But at some point, do we need, like, can you talk us through like the last couple of years of like, did we use a contingency? What did we use it for?
Let us do a little analysis of that. And so I don't do it off the cuff,
Okay.
but the reserves is a true contingency. When it's drastic in town, we have the economy problems or we have a COVID, that's where our true backstop is. This is for things that we can't anticipate, November through March when we were preparing the budget in the coming year, what is it that we couldn't anticipate? And so we really have a strong value culture within the organization that you need to anticipate your budgeting needs. And our budget is very lengthy. It's 700 pages, but the public knows exactly how we're spending our dollars. And so, the culture of the organization allows us to have a contingency fund that's not overly large. But I just thought it should be noted because what happens is the contingency was established prior to my arrival in 2004 and it hasn't changed. And so, the value of 50,000 today is different than it was in the year 2000. And so, just an example of how the staff works diligently to be prudent with our financial resources.
And what John didn't tell you is when there's so many other pressures on the general fund to increase, we hardly ever can justify bumping up the contingency by
Yeah,
25 grand because there's so many other demands.
No, understood.
The group insurance, you can see in perspective of the other areas of the general fund, it's a significant expenditure. So here it drives home the point, we're really a service organization. We're here to serve the community. And so between personnel and group insurance, we're at 84% of the budget, and everything else, postage, gas, electricity, everything else is the 16.2% training.
Significant.
Yes. And that's why the hiring freeze is so effective in really balancing the budget. So notable increases, the general fund, the operating budget is proposed to increase 3.2%, a $2.3 million increase. Throughout the water fund and the general fund, the noteworthy increases are the employee health insurance, a $1.4 million increase. Unfreezing of 10 positions that is driven by the 6 lead service line positions that I mentioned earlier in Public Works. And so 6 of the 10 are related to that unfunded mandate that we need to replace all of our lead service lines. And so the wage and longevity adjustments. Earlier, we were talking longevity is the tenure of our employees. And so as the employees are here longer, they are in many of the first 5 years, they're in a step program. And so wages are adjusted accordingly. And then longevity, there is a stipend associated with different benchmarks of tenure where employees are compensated for their longevity, the knowledge of the organization, the knowledge of the community. Please.
The health insurance, that's a pretty big increase.
It is.
So was that expected? Something like that.
So,
It was not, that we were surprised, as, you know, we rely on a consultant to actually monitor the market for us and actually look at our specific aggregate data. We were not expecting it as we entered budget discussions. See, it is by and large driven by trend in the healthcare industry, applied to our own metrics, to our own population. We'll talk a little more as we get into executive session when we talk about health insurance, but new, you know, prescription drugs are the driver, essentially. GLP-1s are a big driver in cost increases, not $1.4 million, that is merely trend driven, but there's a lot of components in the healthcare industry that is expecting double digits. Their initial proposal to us was upwards of 2 million. We were comfortable reducing their figure because we do maintain their reserve, but if indeed it comes to be that, we can cover it through specific reserve. But yeah, it was a shock.
And we're hoping this is maybe a one-time shock and not something that's gonna recur next year.
Health insurance is something that we have to manage very closely every year. And so, we hope that this is an anomaly year, but there's no guarantee. And so we're constantly reviewing ways to be cost effective with the health insurance.
Trustee Schick. I mean, you know, I mentioned, I'm the director of nonprofit, so I'm keeping track of all of that. For our health insurance, what we've done, we managed to get it to just a single-digit increase this year. But part of it is managing what the employee share is going to be, and also which plans we're offering. And I noticed, I mean, I don't know if that's an executive session thing, but I don't know if we necessarily want to look at offering maybe fewer plans, different plans. I mean, those are ways to, I mean, at home, HONE, my group, we have a PO and an HMO also.
We do have a little more info on that.
And then the last item is regarding the inflationary increases for vehicle parts and services. We maintain our own fleet for the most part, everything from fire apparatus to, the fleet vehicles. And so it's just some increases there. And then without these cost increases for the general fund would actually be decreasing by $446,000. And so there really is an attempt to manage our costs. So with the capital improvements, we've talked about some of these, but these are the components of the capital improvements, the capital budget, buildings and grounds at the top, maintaining our buildings, the public improvements. That includes street resurfacing, the downtown hotel garage is part of that. And so, as you know, that's a shared garage for the downtown public, as well as the tech park. The tech park is responsible for their component, but the village is responsible for a portion of the downtown garage. Street resurfacing is about $3.4 million. We also have the Main Street corridor enhancement program. So those improvements were about a $750,000 improvement. And then there's also going to be new entryway signage with the change in the village's seal. There will be a new image that will be forthcoming for entryway signage. And so those are some of the components of the public improvements. Equipment replacements is everything from body worn cameras for the police department to firefighter, equipment, safety equipment. And so it just runs the gamut for all of our departments. The utilities, two major components there is the lead service replacement program and then the water main replacements. Each of those is about a $5 million value in the proposed budget.
You talked about the garage, you talked about the hotel garage. Is that,
It's
but
one.
it's not built yet.
No, so in the village is responsible for the downtown garage. And so that includes both for downtown general use, the first floor will be dedicated. And then the next two floors are for the hotel. And it's the village's responsibility to build that. And then there's part of the development agreement with the hotelier, they will pay a lease to the village. And then the Science and Technology Park has the upper floors. And so the master plan of the tech park has always included a garage there. And so it's a combination garage. So when the TIF district was created for the hotel, in that area, that very specific area from basically the former site where Annie's was, or former Annie's, to Niles Avenue up to where the parking garage is going just north of the alley, and then includes the new building we call 8030 Lamont. So the downtown TIF Hotel TIF is that small area. And so it's responsible for the parking garage. Excuse me.
John, one other question.
Please.
Do we- Any responsibility for upkeep at the garage that's adjacent to High Point and 8,000 North? Some of that is public parking.
Yes, but High Point will own it 100% at the point when the project sells. And so
We currently own that garage right now. We have a lease agreement.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, could you just repeat that? You're saying they have a lease agreement that allows them to buy it from us?
The development agreement between the village and the High Point owner in Jeep does prescribe that they purchase the garage from us when they transfer the property. When we sell it, when it's fully stabilized and they sell it, they have to pay us for the garage to buy it and then sell it as a private.
Okay.
And just a couple of highlights from the CIP. We talked about the aerial apparatus for the fire department. We have the annual refuse recycling cart replacement program that's important. The 911 emergency upgrade we talked about. Continuing to pursue sustainable fleet. So the hybrid vehicles are being rolled out in our police department. And then we buy a refuse truck every year. So it's time to replace one of our refuse trucks. And so with that includes the proposed budget as it's presented. And so now we're moving into, in the transmittal memo, in the budget message, it talked about strategic enhancements. And so, and they would require new revenue. And so the first one is the 4th ambulance in peak demand power hours arrangement. And so the EMS, the emergency medical service incidents within our community have increased by about 10% over the last 5 years. And we'll get into more detail when Fire Chief Eschner is here, but conceptually wanted to set the table as Julian talks about the revenue source. And so the recommendation is to move into phase in a 4th ambulance, beginning with deploying it during the peak demand hours, 3 weekdays. So that's between the hours of 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. And then we'll be staffing that through overtime. And so that's a more cost-effective approach currently than hiring additional employees to staff an ambulance 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. And so this allows us, because we're continuing to train more and more of our firefighters to be paramedics. And so this is an effective way for us to continue to train more of the employees to be paramedics, to obtain the additional ambulance, and then to staff it on an overtime basis to meet the peak demands that we see happening in the community. And then the second item is regarding the restructuring, enhancing our development services. Over the past year, we've talked about the desire to enhance how we handle development services, and all of the departments are involved in this. But the Matrix entity has completed their study, their analysis, looking at best practices, looking at what we do. They have recommendations, and so you've received that report. We have already started to implement a number of those recommendations, but there's a number of recommendations over the next couple of years in order to fully achieve what we're striving for and the efficiencies and the service level. We can't obtain the service level without some additional expenses. And so this is in preparation of the committee of the whole meeting on April 20th, where Matrix will be here to present their findings and to have a more detailed conversation about this. But again, we wanted to set the stage just conceptually for the revenue component. So any questions or comments about this?
Trustee Wilson.
Please. There, right.
Are they consistent?
It's important to have a little bit of flexibility. There are days when there's training needs, and so there, as the police chief and the team has been analyzing the data, I'm not sure that they're ready to commit to these 3 days always, but conceptually it'll be the same, basically same 3 days.
But while it's being, it could be going for 3 days.
Yeah, I'll let Chief Eschner really dive into that, because he's aware of the training demands that the department is under. And so sometimes certain training exercises pull the staff away, and it may make sense to have the power hours on that day, or it may make more sense to have it on a different day. And so let me let him really dive into the details of that. So with that, turn it back over to Finance Director Prindy.
Thanks, John. So as John mentioned, the budget up until this point is balanced. The revenues are sufficient to cover the expense as presented. These expanded new initiatives that John just covered do require additional revenue. In our review of available revenue sources, it is our recommendation that in order to fund them, we update the amusement or entertainment tax from its current 2%, increase it to 5%, and add streaming services to the tax bill. So back when we implemented the amusement tax, we did not include streaming providers. At the time, there was still legal challenges pending, and we wanted to let those play out. They have played out to the favor of municipalities, as Chicago has been an example. We have spoken to the 4 or 5 municipalities that do have streaming. It is a fairly seamless process. It takes a little bit to get on board and get everyone to comply, but it is a very seamless process. It is one of the sources that has a fairly small impact to the end user. We estimate, and there's again varying estimates of how many families subscribe to digital services, how much they cost a month. We're going with a very conservative $60 a month digital subscription, and that can include both TV. So, you know, your Apple TVs, your a portion of Amazon Prime and Netflix and so on. Also audio, which is, you know, Spotify, Amazon Music. So at that $60 a month, you know, again, 5% is just $3 or 36 for a year. So it is our recommendation to pursue this revenue source if the board is inclined to adopt and approve the expanded expenses as proposed.
So Julian and John, this would also be on tickets.
Correct, 5% would be on fixed location system.
So on some level, we would be levying this tax against we would be, our tickets that are sold at the North Shore Center, which is a center that we own and pay someone to operate for us, would be subject to that. So we're taxing ourselves, right? Well, we're taxing our own customers.
We're taxing our customers.
We're taxing our customers.
In the past, we did not exempt the performing arts.
Right, no, we should. I mean, if we're gonna have other, Skokie Theater and other venues are gonna have to charge this. We have to, so who, it would be Skokie Theater, Devonshire Theater? It's the Park District.
We have exempted nonprofit.
Okay.
So schools or park districts,
So movie theaters.
movie theaters,
Okay,
you know, if the amusement parks, so the trampoline parks.
Oh, gotcha.
Pieces of the world.
Okay.
Family nights. Those are in-person amusement centers.
okay. Any questions? Trustee Iverson.
Those two special expenses, it was over 700,000, for ambulance, yes, for that, and then for the matrix development, it was 350 per year. And you're saying there that 17 is, or you said 700 and something is the increase that we're getting from the change to 2 to 5, so that feels 300,000 short. It's
No, that's.
Increase is.
right, but we've already got 330. And we need another million.
I'm sorry, no, that's a misnomer. The increase is 1,000,066.
Oh, got it.
That,
Okay.
I apologize, I did not catch that when I prepared this. So the increase is 1,000,066, sufficient to fund the base expenses.
Thank you, trustee. Any other comments or questions? Trustee Schechter.
Just a clarification, so looking at the memo with the, the revenue options, that's for another, because there was. If I looked at those and
What page are you on?
oh, in our, binder.
Oh, right, yeah, it's in the supplemental.
Last,
Yep.
staple.
Yes.
Is that up for, cause to me, I was looking at the refuse fee, that's, it's already pretty low and adding just $1, it's just another 250 grams for stuff that we need. But I wasn't sure about where that.
That's
the stuff
regressive
that-
tax though. That would be regressive. Right, because people, someone who lives in a large house is gonna get, so I think we have to be really careful about that. And these are not regressive taxes. Right, this is not a regressive tax. So that's the only thing. I mean, I think, John, when are we gonna have this?
This is now tonight's revenue. And so now is the time. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I can give a brief summary. Sure.
I support you, but it just seemed like.
So the cost to provide service is about $28 per stop. And so we're collecting $9.25, so a third of the cost, basically, a little bit less. And so the village implemented this fee, diversifying our revenue in order to balance the budget. And the initial concept was we'll implement a third, and then year 2, we'll implement a second, and then year 3, we'll get up to the price of providing the service. And there was a lot of negativity within the community about the fee. And so it was determined that at that time that it would remain at the $9.25 rate. And so that's a little bit of the history. Most municipalities use outside services to collect garbage. We have in-house employees that do it. The advantage to us is that we're able to utilize that fleet in removing snow. And so it's very effective to us to have 11 different pieces of apparatus in order to, clear the streets. So, but when the municipalities are using an outside service, that outside service bills the resident very commonly. And so many of our neighboring municipalities are paying the $28 to an outside entity for that monthly service. And so the village prides itself on providing high quality services in a very financially responsible, fiscally responsible manner. And so the garbage pickup is an example of that. The free yard, being able to rake the leaves into the street and then us coming through and cleaning those for free. Many municipalities require people to bag it and put a sticker on it. And so it's just an example of the high quality services that the village provides. But there's the history of why we're at the rate that we're at.
John, I have a question. Looking at the yard waste sticker fee, proposal for $350,000. Does that anticipate doing away with our free leaf collection, or is this just for yard waste generate absent leaves
It does not contemplate the removal
of the leaf program?
So currently yard waste goes into a bag. It has to go into a bag and then it's put at the curb or in the alley. And it's just the cost of buying the bag. And so this is putting a sticker on yard waste.
See, to me, that's not a regressive tax. Because people, you have a choice. We don't pick up grass clippings, number one. You can compost, there are other things you can do, right?
Some people use a landscape service and they may take away some, more the grass clippings than maybe the yard waste, but maybe the yard waste as well.
Many people just mulch the grass.
Mulch it, right? But we pick up grass clippings.
We don't pick up.
We haven't picked those up since 2002, 3, 5.
Five-ish. I
Right.
think, yeah.
To me, even though it's small, the credit card being passed through. That's, I don't see why we wouldn't. I don't. I mean, more and more. There are credit card fee pass-throughs. I don't.
Yeah, or like when you're getting your, so I just did this for my organization, when you're renewing your plates with the state, it's free if you're doing an e-check.
Right.
I mean, we could, if we're giving a free option, I can.
Yeah,
see
we could keep
that,
it someone
and
come in with a
then
check
Yeah.
during our early bird hours, or mail a check, or do we have an e-check, an ACH?
Correct, yes, folks can't pay, but
Okay,
Are there any, if it increases the amount of cash that comes to the counter, are there any labor costs that would be offset by the savings of a credit card fee? If people avoid the credit card fee and use cash, does that have any operational issues?
that we were, went back to the checkbook essentially. Paid by cash. The reason why we didn't jump on it is it buys a little more back when. Credit card fees just seem to our folks rub them the wrong way. At some point, this may become inevitable for us, these menu of options here. At some point, we may come back to you and recommend implementation of more than one of these. So,
when I think about the staff at the counter, and I think about potential, and I don't even see it on here, thank you very much. When I think about the potential for ill will, that would be a vehicle sticker raise in costing, which is not even on here. That would truly be regressive, right? So I would still advocate for that. Again, it's small, it's $150,000, but it's consistent with what is happening in a lot of other places. Is there anything else on this list? Let me, real quick, video gambling. We were scheduled to have talked about that in our March 16th committee of the whole. We didn't, we deferred it. We will be talking about that. John and I have not set a date certain, have we?
No, not necessarily.
But over the summer, we will. April's already spoken for. We're gonna be talking about the matrix and we're gonna be talking about the public comment. What do we have teed up for May, John? We're gonna skip because there's some scheduling issues,
Oh,
right?
that's right, that's right.
Okay, so June. So why don't we just commit now that in June, we'll be talking about video gaming. At our committee of the whole. Okay. Does anyone, so putting that aside, because we'll be talking about that later. We've talked about the potential of a refuse fee. We've talked about the yard waste sticker fee. Credit card cash through. Does anyone else want to advocate or discuss any of these in particular? Now's the time. Trustee Schechter. Yeah,
I was intrigued about the special service area for downtown. Not necessarily advocating for it, because it does feel a little bit inequitable, compared to Old Orchard where, you know. But we're actually giving them money as opposed to them giving us money, but I mean, well, they are giving us money. But I just was curious, because I could see justification given the amount of.
there's a very particular process for establishing an SSA. It's
Yeah.
different than the business district at Old Orchard was established just by this board, but not this board, but the prior board. Keith, were you on the board when they had? Yeah, okay, thank you.
And that's a good point.
Trustee Robinson, right, so,
Westfield came, the ownership
Right.
came to the village. Well, the village went to Westfield a long time ago, 10 years ago, and said, we need you to invest. We need you to think about the mall. We have to prepare. It's important asset for the community. The school districts benefit. The schools benefit from it. A specific school district benefits from it. The park district, the community, there's so many benefits to it, but it has to be sustainable. And so they kept telling us, there's no way that for a number of reasons why the Skokie Mall didn't make it to the top tier in order to get investment. And so they approached us because there needed to be a public-private partnership. And we looked at a number of options, and in the option that that staff and the board approved, staff recommended and the board approved, was for the users to pay the tax. And so that money is now what has unlocked the residential and the investment that has happened there. And so that investment would not have happened without that business
it's a
district.
stimulus.
It was a stimulus. And so, but the owner came to the village and said, yes, we hear you. We know you want a master plan. We want to do that as well, but there's some reasons why it hasn't happened. So we solved that problem. In this situation, if the downtown is interested in maintaining the service level that the village has, especially when the TIF district ends, because the TIF ends in 2028 for the downtown area, the Illinois Science and Technology Park. So there's a number of village services that are funded by that. The baskets, the flowers, some of the higher level of services in the downtown. And so that will be a burden on the general fund. If the village absorbs that, if there's interest from the business community to have an SSA, that would be an option. Or if the village wanted to pursue the SSA from our direction, that would be an option. But commonly, it's businesses coming to the village and saying, we want to solve this problem. What are some of the tools that are available?
And I think like the mayor said, that is a specific process to follow, and that would require specific ordinances, public hearings. Detailing out who was gonna be in the special service area.
But I might suggest, so one of the deliverables in our budget is an economic vitality strategy for the community. It is, just to kind of correct the record, it is not, this work will not be done just looking at downtown Skokie and Main Street. It will be community-wide in scope, so I just want to make sure that's out there. But I would recommend that part of that study is there will be a component on downtown. But the consultant be asked to address that. to address. You know, what would need to happen to form an SSA? How would there be a partnership to form it? What could happen? Who governs it? What's the length of time? You know, is it, John, is it like a tip? Is it 23 years? Sunset?
I was thinking there,
It's 20 years. Okay, so I think that, I think it would be super helpful to get those conversations going with the business community. To have that detailed in that study. I think we can use that as a springboard for conversations, especially since we're up against the expiration of the downtown too. Like one of the extra services, there's a special attention to snow removal in the downtown, snow removal services. So that's something then that, you know, would shift.
and there's two different types, sales tax, property tax, and so, you know, it's a lot of pieces to it for the businesses to consider.
Trustee Keith Robinson first, and we'll go to trustee Wilson.
Let's see the cannabis, this, that.
We saw cannabis revenue was somewhere. I saw it. We already have it. But
It's
it's,
included in other taxes in those charts and slides, it's just shy of 600,000 annually for the village.
are you thinking to increase our percentage?
No.
You were just curious about it.
Right.
Yeah, because we do, it's not a big, I mean, it's money.
Yeah.
That we are grateful for and we rely on, but as I recall, what is it about? It's 210? Okay,
But that's a combination of home rule, which is the 3% maximum that we can charge, and then the state shares of.
On the state share. okay,
That's all very controlled by it.
okay.
And
It says 4,000.
In.
Is-
In the revenue.
You look at the pullout,
I believe that they split out the home. State.
because I saw a smaller number as well. It's not the windfall.
But the village is set up to have two dispensaries, and so we have attempted to recruit a second dispensary, and the market has dried up a bit. But that would be one way to increase the revenue as well. Theoretically, if they don't cannibalize, not the best choice of word, but you know, other retailers, but.
Thank you for raising. Trustee Wilson.
Does that also apply to?
Yes, isn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It does, and it will, in the new process,
Yeah.
all STRs are subject to the same seven.
Yeah, that was part of the pilot.
So is
Getting the risk.
this number reflective? It's not, it's not, because we don't really know.
We don't really.
not know.
Yet.
And the lag in getting it fully implemented, we didn't.
Again, this is a small one, but what's the elasticity in this? You know, what's the, you know, right now we're at 7.5%. As I recall, yeah, Wilmette is Wilmette only 9.75? I thought they were high. I thought Wilmette was double digits.
I will confirm, I recently looked at. It could be that.
Maybe it
It's
is.
an update.
I thought it was higher, but. Maybe they had it higher, so when that property went in on the north side of Old Orchard Road,
Mhm.
it was hot, I think it was higher.
They-
So maybe they pushed, you know, the kilo earlier. So we're consistent now with that extent. Is anyone, let's take these. So is there, property tax, we're gonna talk about that in December, as part of the levy discussion. The amusement and entertainment surcharge. This is the one that staff has proposed to fund the Ford ambulance power hours and the additional staffing in the building division to help us with permitting and what have you. Anybody want to discuss that? Is there consensus that we're in agreement that that's appropriate? Okay, I don't hear any objections. Oh, you do have vehicle sticker increase. Again, I did, I don't do the rest of it, but. I'm not in favor of that. Again, I see that as highly regressive. I mean, it's not a lot of money, but it is regressive, and I think it would be a problem for staff. Anybody have comments, concerns? Trustee Lissadini?
Well, maybe a $10 increase is a lot, but I think we have to start doing a little because I just don't want us to be in a position where we've had, another 35-year freeze on taxes and then we have to rip the Band-Aid off. So perhaps a smaller increase is warranted so that it is not so shocking.
On the vehicle sticker.
On the vehicle sticker. I mean, going from 40 to 45 does not seem excessive. Going from 40 to 50, I agree, is a really big jump. So is there a way that we could do it? So we're kind of splitting the difference?
So that would get us what, about 212,000?
212,000. The only thing I would say is the process to renew vehicle stickers starts in March. We can implement the rate increase right now. It would be giving the residents a little smaller window to absorb this information. And again, the budget is balanced as proposed. We don't necessarily need to implement the revenue. We will never turn revenue down in funding our operations, so don't get me wrong. But perhaps if the board wants to pick this up in the future.
I would say, can we park this for next year?
Yeah.
I think maybe that's something, if the group agrees, maybe that's something that we talk about next year. Again, because we'd be up against the same thing if we're talking about it.
Correct, but we could prepare in advance of when the decision.
Yeah.
I think
Start talking.
Trustee Check.
I mean, the other thing is, I'm just looking at 90% of what we use that revenue for is the capital. It's not like it's a funny thing. So, yeah, I don't know, I really like the approach that we're taking, which is that. And that's why I don't, is that we're thinking of what we want to spend the money on. And then we're looking, what is the revenue source, so that when people know that we're increasing the, the amusement tax or, entertainment surcharge, they know where that money is going. And so I like that approach.
I agree. I think people, like, for example, when this board made the tough call to increase the property tax levy after a 35-year freeze. We knew why it was being done because there were positions, because the type of service that the community is expecting and deserves, we could not provide with the level of frozen positions and the three firefighter positions that we were uncertain about whether they would be funded or not, weren't. Right, so we are having to fund those. So again, I agree with Trustee Schechter. I think when we do raise funds for the community to know what they're going through. So yeah, I agree.
the concept of incremental increases versus larger increases is helpful, that type of feedback. The water fund is an interesting, similar type approach. Decades ago, the village only changed the water rate every 5 years. And so, but they got to the point that it needed to be adjusted annually because it was too much of a shock every 5 years. And so that type of feedback is helpful as it relates to whether it's refuse or vehicle stickers or whatever the case may be, if there's a desire for incremental changes as opposed to more drastic changes, and if a policy of some kind would be helpful.
Two senses. Is and increase. That's dumped up. I think we need to.
We need to what?
Boil the frog.
Mercy.
The band.
Rip off the Band-Aid.
No, rip off the. It's the opposite of what I say. Frog goes into a nice cool. On water and then slowly.
Well, that wasn't what I was envisioning. I don't want to tell you about it. The only one,
pay taxes, it all goes down.
so just to bring this part of the conversation, and less out, I'll throw it to village manager and finance director in a second. But what I'm hearing is there is consensus about the recommendation for the amusement and entertainment surgery. Okay. We're gonna park the rest of it, maybe revisit vehicle sticker increase next year. What about the credit card pass-through? To me, that's just revenue we should be getting that we're not. We're absorbing something that I don't think we should be absorbing.
I think it makes sense to charge those fees, so,
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's not an outrageous concept
Okay.
at this point.
So let's be true to what we just talked about. John? There might be an extra $150,000. Where? What would we do with that?
I think of love.
Well, yeah, but I think the onus, you're right,
No,
but I think what we need to do is look to our professional staff in light of what the community told us through the strategic plan. Where could we put that estimated $150,000 to the highest and best use?
Okay.
Yeah,
We'll take a look.
Maybe park that until we talk about the whole budget, all the hearings.
maybe, we'll figure it out. Trustee Robinson.
So say here, a lot of nickel and dimes, dollar ads. It's a lot of ads. It's gonna say it out loud.
And I think that is a good thing to say out loud, but I think another important thing to say out loud, when we talk about the dire circumstances that this village has looked at historically, with the fund balance shrinking and the inability to, when unfunded mandates come down the pipe like they do, a lot of that was a result of only raising the water fund every 5 years, of freezing the property tax levy for 35 years, which now we're seeing, this is the result of that. This is the result of that, of not raising those fees incrementally, like every other town does. So I think there's another side to it.
Just wanted to say it out loud.
No, appreciate it. Okay. Anything else, John and Julie? So we're a little bit past our schedule. I want to take a pause but before we do, we'll take a quick break. But I'm mindful of the agenda. And, the agenda calls for public comment at the end of our meeting. We still have a few more things to go. So I want to defer to our guests. It would be 3 minutes and I'm not going to, don't. Okay, well, let me finish. So it's either now or it's at the end before we go into our closed session. So I'm gonna give you your choice. It's not gonna be both. You can have 3 minutes now or 3 minutes later. I'm just trying to extend you your courtesy. If you do have something you'd like to ask me.
Public comment.
Yeah, and we're not going to do that. It's once this evening. So either now or later.
So I'll just go.
Or one.
Oh, it should.
Well,
Good evening. My name is David Dock. I live at 9330 Laurel. I'm gonna make some general comments because my availability during the next week is a little bit uncertain. I don't think we need a new ambulance. I just think we need an ambulance working 24/7, 365. It's funny to use ambulances out there. I also believe that, Trustee Iverson told me that there was an ambulance parked somewhere already that wasn't being used at a different point in time. So I think I'm a little confused why we need to buy a new ambulance. I just think we need staff. The budget needs to include money to remove the tree stumps in front of our residents that have been there for 20 years from dead trees. The budget needs to include money to repatriate the unevenness of the parkway. Both Trustee Robinson and Trustee Iverson have been there in the past year and said that that needed to be done. It's still not complete. I seek that to be completed as soon as possible. There are needs for stop signs up and down Laurel because we continue to have speeding cars come down the street due to GPS people bringing them through there because the old Orchard Road project isn't finished yet and our people are racing to get to the expressway and they use our street as that street. Along with the Jane Stenson parents. There needs to be process. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the budget, but we need to find county, state, other resources that can plant large mature trees along the expressway from Dempster to Gulf Road, so there's a sound barrier. Like there is on the west side of this, the expressway over there is a double, width amount, there. I don't understand why we have a vehicle sticker tax at all. I don't know what we get back for it. There are municipalities that charge one and you know, it serves a function, but I'm not sure. I see what the point of that is. So I'm against raising that in any way. It's also a regressive tax as mentioned by the mayor. The police need more funding, but we also need the police and fire departments to be organized differently. We have 2 deputy chiefs in both departments. I think that's a luxury. I think we could do the same job with some commanders, acting as acting chiefs in the interim things as we do already in some certain ways. We need more beat officers at the beat level, and we need less bureaucrats that create bureaucracy in this village. I would hope that these issues and focuses on where we could cut expenditures, especially certain commissions which spend enormous amounts of money.
Mr. Doppel, we are at time. We actually went a couple seconds over, so. And you're always welcome to submit, as you know, you're always welcome to submit comments in writing. So thank you.
I did forget to put my
Well-
point of information.
Right, well, and we're, sorry, you can certainly put it in writing to us or email.
Not a-
So we're gonna take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back. She had an unexpected work.
And once you do great, I had one more wrong. I was like, no license for you. Jesus, they touched the other day, just what you would do. That's like.
Okay, trustee Schechter, we're gonna reconvene. No, that's okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Before we go any further, I want to just take a beat to thank the staff. So much work has gone into preparing this budget, months, weeks of analysis, long hours.
You're here.
Alex, his wife had a baby in the middle of this. Every single assistant too that has done this has had a child and you wasn't extra. Both. We're born in the middle of, I'm just saying, so, I just want to recognize all the great, and Julian, great work by staff, and he's not here tonight, but he's not feeling well, but special shout out to our assistant village manager, Nick White, that, you know, putting together the budget is, it's done in the manager's office, cooperative effort between the manager's office, the finance department, and all the departments. But the assistant village manager has a particular responsibility for it. And it's unfortunate that Nick couldn't be here, but just wanted to, you know, give a special recognition to his efforts as well. So with that said, it is now time to talk about we're going to start on the individual departments and the board of trustees, so which is all of us. If you look at page 33 in our budget message. So actually, you know, this just outlines, there's a decrease of $17,300. That's partially because the strategic plan was in this last year. We are going to be funding software to, it's a dashboard, as I understand it, that I know the village of Glencoe is using. We used the same consultant that we did to develop their strategic plan, but it's a front-facing dashboard that will be keeping the community updated on our progress in implementing the strategic plan, which I think is exciting. Again, we had a very successful, and I know a few of you were here in February. We had the training for our board and commission chairs and vice chairs, very well received. Very well received. Can I play that?
I don't know what it was.
So we're budgeting for another training session. I did get an update. We have actually appointed, it's up, I thought it was more than this, but it's 56. There's an updated number since August. This board has appointed 56 people to boards, our advisory boards and commissions, and that does not include reappointments. This is just new or recently returning. There are a couple folks who served in the past who are serving. We're establishing the youth commission. I established the Faith Leaders Council. Trustee Pierce Slovan, who we're missing tonight. She attends those kind of when she can. Because of her work and her involvement with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, that seemed like a good fit for her. So she's been attending those as well. We've expanded the opportunity for residents to address us at public meetings. And we're consistent with our 3 minutes. We've expanded those opportunities, and you know, we'll be talking about this at our committee of the whole meeting next Monday. But that's just part of our community engagement strategy. It's certainly not the whole of it by any stretch, but it's definitely changed. Any comments or questions? Trustee Schechter.
Yeah, just when I was going through the all the budget items, I actually thought there were 2 other, just for the record, things to add to the snapshot. One is the strategic plan. I thought Mayor, you would have added certainly that is a big, accomplishment for this board is
Yeah.
the strategic
Yeah, no, I
plans.
agree. Yeah.
And then the other, maybe it seems minor, but to me, it's a big deal that we started doing these board briefs. You know, putting it out in social media, these are, this is what, these are the highlights of the upcoming agenda. I think it's just part of the transparency, those were two things that I thought we should have added to this, to the snapshot. I don't know if you're looking at, I had also some thoughts on the objectives, but on that, this is the time.
John?
If it's regarding the Board of Trustees budget, now is the time.
Oh.
If-
Yeah. So, one of my thoughts on the objectives is some of the continuation of our work with regard to public participation, citizen engagement. And I know we'll talk about this at the committee of the whole, but I was excited to see what Boulder, Colorado has done with these community and council forums as pilots for bringing the council and the community, you know, together to talk about some ideas. And that's a whole other conversation that I thought that be an objective. And also, just as we're looking at processes, to me, it's not really clear the line between the commission and the village board for policy making. When do we send things there? When do they send things to us? It's just putting that as a kind of objective. And then adding the housing commission as an objective. Those were the three things that I thought would be good for us to do in coming year.
So we'll be next Monday in our committee of the whole. Part of the time we'll be talking about our public comments and public engagement. So we'll be talking about that. I think the, community and council forum that, Boulder, Colorado had, we historically, the village board has done those, other boards have done those. I see us doing those on an as needed basis. I think the goal could be like one a year, maybe, again, but I don't even know that needs to be a goal. I think it's gonna depend on the issues that presents. So I think when there's an issue that presents, so maybe it's video game. Maybe it's, I don't know, you know what, I think we'll know it when we see it. But I think, I don't know that we need to pilot it. I think it's just something that we as a board are clearly interested in increased community engagement. Last year, staff came up with a plan for us that included, and John, I believe there are some plans being formulated now.
That's right.
Right, so when will that be presented to us?
Likely at the budget conference.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, so when our communications team presents to us at our, and they are.
Next.
I can tell you, they are,
Yes, on April 16th, Thursday night.
right, okay, so Thursday, we'll hear more about that. Oh, so I don't know that we need anything formal to adopt. What, this, I think that's just, this is a shared aspiration that we have. And we're gonna do it our way, right? And when there's an issue that presents that would be right for community dialogue. Now, in the past, when the board has done that, interestingly, and if any of you attended, and check, I don't remember if you did. Did you attend? There was one in November of 2014 and one.
Yep, I went.
Okay,
I know you're the community forums.
right.
I was at both.
So this would be akin to that, but the board didn't participate. Right, board members were there to observe, but the board members didn't participate. Because there was a sense by the consultants who were helping us, a couple who trustee Lisa Levy knows very well. Yeah.
Oh, the Axelrod.
Yeah. their advice to us at the time was that board members being at the table and participating could sway conversations. So better that we listen and observe. So again, that's something we have to think about. Trustee Robinson, did you have a thought? You've got that, you've got that contemplative look on your face.
I agree.
Yeah, so, okay, I would like to, trustee Leslie. So this is not for this year, but I wanna put it before all of us. I think that we need to, reevaluate trustee compensation and board and commission compensation. This is a topic that should be no surprise if you've talked to me before about this, but because the compensation is so low, and I include your salary in that, there's a disconnect between what our responsibilities are, the time that we actually spend, the amount that the community expects us to be on call, and we limit citizen participation because the only people who can afford to serve are the people who can afford to serve. So we miss out on so much perspective by having such low compensation. And so I want to start thinking about, not for this term, but how we can move forward so that we can increase the ability of people who are maybe holding down 2 or 3 jobs, that maybe this is one of their part-time jobs. It also speaks to the level of professionalism that we expect and the level of service that our community expects of us. And I think that especially given all of the curveballs that we've been thrown lately from the federal government and how much we've had to adapt and how much we've had to learn and how much community therapy we've had to do. I don't think that our current compensation is commensurate with the level of service that we give. So I've said my piece. This budget for this year, but moving forward, I think that for next term, we need to start thinking about that.
So I would say any type of compensation raise needs to be agreed to and passed through ordinance at least 180 days before the next election or your next election.
No problem.
And that's state statute. I'm just throwing that out.
Yeah,
I
so,
think the
so
trustees-
can we, before we'll get to you next, so when would that be? So the next elections for trustees,
Well,
for the
we're,
district trustees is April.
we're askew right now.
Right. Well, for district trustees
Right.
though, for district trustees, it's a year from now, a year from last week, yeah, right?
Yeah, we would need to look at the calendar because
Yeah.
there has to be a primary, there's a number of factors that probably weigh in, and so we should be precise at looking at the calendar.
Absolutely.
So we would need to look at that, okay. Right, because if there's a primary, the primary would be in February, so it's 6, so then that's August. I can tell you it's 6 months between August and February, so that's what. So for district trustees, we need to talk about it then. For the at-large trustee, the mayor's position and village clerk's position, it would be, again, that would be August of 2028 is what we would have, we need to talk about that. But I would think that if we were having a conversation in August, that it would apply to the new term. See, that's by statute. You can't raise it. You can't do it. It has to start with the new term. It would not,
Exactly.
it would not, if there was an increase that was voted on and approved, it would not kick in until the next.
So you can't raise your own salaries while you're in.
Makes perfect sense.
Right, so I'm just explaining why it's 6 months before.
I just feel that the discussion of timing is academic. I mean, it's obviously relevant. But this is some philosophical change that you're discussing and not here, but it's a philosophical change. It's talking about changing the identity of trustees. And it's a very large conversation.
It is a large conversation, but I think that if we're gonna say that we wanna be a citizen of democracy, we have to make. Leading a democracy available to all citizens, and if
the only people who can sit in this room are the people who can afford to sit here, then we're losing out on a lot of perspective, a lot of expertise, a lot of ideas, and a lot of energy.
It's a large conversation.
It's interesting that, I have a friend, you know, Heather Ross in Northbrook, they don't get paid at all.
No,
That's
and Lincolnwood is a third of us. And yeah, it's just, the fact is, what you're saying makes perfect sense. But this wasn't done by accident. The structure that we have here was done deliberately and for a purpose. And, you know, so we've got to weigh whether or not discarding this purpose is worth doing in order to fulfill enough. That's all.
Well, and I hear you, and I think it also applies to how certain boards and commissions have paid positions, and most of them don't. And I think that's unfair as well.
I agree with you. I think that's an inequity and that's something that has troubled me for decades, to be frank. Having been part of the village organization for almost 30 years now, that inequity shocked me when I heard about it. I served as a chair, I served on the zoning board of appeals in Park Ridge for 13 years. I was chair of that board for 7 years. I never received a dime of compensation, and I didn't expect it. And I think the inequity of paying some of our commissions and not paying others is something that needs to be looked at. As we've seen, I believe we can ill afford to pay all commissioners. That might, in an ideal utopia, maybe that's what we would do. I don't know, there's no other town that does that. I've asked staff because this has troubled me. There are only 2 neighboring towns that provide some nominal stipends for a few of their boards, but not many do. So, I don't know. I think that's a larger conversation. I will tell you that anyone we have appointed since August to an advisory board, one of our 5 advisory boards and commissions that's paid. Anybody who's been appointed by us to one of those boards, I have sent a personal message to them saying, congratulations, board approved your appointment. By the way, you'll be contacted by our finance department because you will be receiving a nominal stipend. Please understand this may not always be the case. So I don't know. I think that's a larger discussion. I'm glad you brought it up. I think it's separate and distinct from the board compensation that you brought up. But I think, you know, we all need to just let that percolate a little bit. And yeah. So that might be. So if I. Okay, anything else for the Board of Trustees before we move on? Trustee Kamani.
The 12.5 for the dashboard, I don't see it listed in the budget under 26, 27. I see the 50 for what we just did, for the exercise that we just did. But I don't, and I'm wondering if it's somewhere else. I don't know. I think that's, did you?
The 12.5 it's on page 12 of the big budget detail. And it's under strategic plan implementation. So it's, if you're looking at page 12 of the larger documents. And you go down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, do you see it?
I'm looking at it.
You're not, I know that's.
So it's page 12, yeah, it's, if you look at, it's down 1.
Okay, so the planning session is what's listed, okay.
So it's the 8 line item down, professional service. And it's board and commission training is $2,000. And
Okay,
then
it's lining up now.
Yeah,
I see it, something was lining up. I thought it was lining up different.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I have to pull up to.
This is in the big budget.
Yeah, so this is what I pulled up too, but I was looking at it on phone, so it looked like strategic plan was 50. You know, but this is. So I just need to get it bigger. Thank you.
That's, the 50 is from last year, that was the
Right, for the
expenditure
session,
the
that's-
benefits.
that was last year, right, this year's.
Okay, anything else on board of trustees before we move on?
This was, since we're looking at this, I always wonder, what is longevity?
Longevity is, for example, when I had been on school, John, you get longevity pay. Right, so when staff have been here for a certain amount of time, they get an extra amount of money as an incentive to stay. Yeah.
Schedule is something like, I think it starts after 8 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's a few $100s, and then it escalates a few $100s every 5 years or so. And I think it tops out at about $2,000.
No, it's not that, it's not that much, trust me.
I was just trying to size it.
Yeah.
1,750 of maximum after
1750,
1750.
but it kicks in.
25 years for 1750. It starts at eight,
Right,
at $800, and then it.
you have to work for it.
That's an
And I mean that in a good way.
And it's not part of like bonus structure. It's completely separate.
Yeah.
It's just.
Okay, let's move on then, Liquor Control Commission, that is on page 39 of the budget message. So in February, we called in all of the liquor license holders. We had a meeting, we talked about everyone has to reapply on an annual basis. And May 1st is when the new year starts for the liquor licenses. But they all came in, Chief Barnes spoke to them, because we do have what we call stings, isn't that what we call them?
So we do
Enforcement
have
stings.
enforcement stings. A lot of times we will get grants, police will get grants and they will send in underage kids to some of the liquor stores or bars to see if they'll get sold to.
And it's for both liquor and tobacco as well, we do that also for tobacco. But they came in, we had a good showing, the council chambers were full, they take it seriously because we take it seriously, and we let them know that we do take liquor licensure seriously in Skokie. You know, there's a tension between health, safety, and welfare in the community and economic vitality. You know, there's that tension. Just for the board's edification, we will be in the next 6 months conducting a comprehensive review of the liquor code. So there may be some things coming to the board prospectively that we want to change our liquor code. We've done that in small doses over the last year with the change that we made to bring sketchbook and take flight into consistency with state code. You might recall that we gave approval for a different type of liquor license for Skokie Provisions that is prospectively opening on Lincoln Avenue. So we've done some of that, and I believe it's good to be flexible that way. For a long time, Skokie's liquor ordinances were not flexible, and there were some real problems with that, so, yeah. Any questions about the liquor licensure? Do they control BYOB as well? Yes, yeah, BYOB, they have to have dram shop, they have to have someone who's trained, and there is a licensure component to that, yeah. Okay, village clerk, page 43, we'll turn it over to village clerk, and I'll decide.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I'd like to go over the office snapshot really quickly. So the clerk's office processed 1,158 passports, responded to approximately 12,200 general information and citizen assistance calls, processed 1,430 real estate transfer tax transactions, issued 98 temporary disability placards, processed 12 voter registration applications and 26 absentee ballot applications. Those were lower because people prefer to do it online now. They feel safer, they don't want anything going by the mail, it's faster, it's documented, it's there, doesn't get lost. So that number is going down. Certified documents, we did 27, filed 38 ordinances, 31 resolutions, 36 proclamations, 350 notary requests, and processed 52 RTA applications. So the clerk's office continues to be very active and an important resource for both residents and non-residents in the village. Even though we're a two-person office, we handle a wide range of responsibilities while staying focused on customer service, efficiency, and accessibility. We provide a number of essential services, which one of them is passport processing. We do temporary handicap placards, RTA applications, voter services. We also take citizens assistance calls every day. Some of them are, people hang up. I don't know. I think some of those are like junk calls. Well, some of them we're just transferring to other departments, and some of them we actually help and get them the assistance they need. In addition, we process transfer taxes and do property research where we're able to identify and collect outstanding fees like unpaid tickets, overdue water bills, and administrative hearing violations. We also prepare oaths of office and conduct swearing-in ceremonies for library trustees, elected officials, and certain positions within the police and fire departments. One positive change that we implemented and that we're receiving great feedback is eliminating the $2 photo fee for residents age 65 and older who complete their applications online with us. This adjustment helps reduce barriers for seniors who may not have easy access to a computer or just find those steps as scanning. You have to scan in your driver's license or upload a photo. They find that challenging. And so we find that if we're just processing that for them, they fill out the application, we scan it, we scan in the photo, they're thrilled because it eliminates that. I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to use a computer. I don't have someone who can help. Sometimes very time consuming, but they're very happy. While this is a small change, it helps reduce costs and improve accessibility to village services for our 65 and older community. Over the past year, the clerk's office has experienced an increase in questions and concerns related to passport applications, particularly from new and naturalized citizens. Many residents have expressed uncertainty about the application process, and others have just been seeking to expedite obtaining a passport or passport cards for identification purposes. So we're able to help them navigate through that. In response, the office has assisted with a wide range of situations and continues to provide guidance to help residents navigate the process accurately and efficiently. The increased demand has also highlighted the importance of language access. I'm able to assist residents in multiple languages, and we also have a translator on site that if I don't speak the language, which I don't speak all of them, we're able to use that and help them. We consistently receive strong feedback and positive reviews for passport services. We serve our residents, but we also serve surrounding communities. So it's not just Skokie that we serve. And I think we've seen an increased amount of referrals with some residents saying that it's the secret that's gotten out regarding the quality and efficiency of our passport services. Sometimes they're not thrilled going to the post office because they frequently will cancel appointments. If you have one error, they send you home. Not been the greatest for them. And we're very patient and we help them through that. We also try to make our office a welcoming place for everyone who walks in. For families and kids, we offer small giveaways along with educational coloring books and magazines. That's increased from our stickers we used to do. Through the Illinois Municipal League, we were able to get materials for free that teach kids how local government works in a fun and engaging way. So while they're getting a passport done or transfer tax or whatever service, I'm able to give them little things to keep them occupied at one counter while we're conducting business at the other. And these coloring books and magazines highlight departments like police, public works, everything within the municipality. Our all-time favorite has still been the I Love Skokie stickers. Like I had mentioned at our previous meeting, I found them from when Marlene Williams was here, and we're on the last few now, so stay tuned for the new stickers I've ordered. Community engagement also plays a big role, from community events, ribbon cuttings, other local activities throughout the year. This past June, I attended the Municipal Clerks Conference in Peoria, where I connected with many Northwest municipal clerks. Recently, we also had the opportunity, which you were there, when we had the local Girl Scout troop, and they helped lead the Pledge of Allegiance, which was a great experience and a real feel good at the beginning of our meeting. I was told many years ago that this was something done at all the meetings where Boy Scouts would come in and have flag ceremonies, which I looked through the old minutes and it was consistent, like every meeting.
It was fun. We were always waiting for them
Yeah.
to nail the ceiling.
Right.
And the flag would go like, and it was little, ones in their uniform.
I know, so cute. So we're looking forward to continuing to build those kinds of meaningful connections and, you know, a nice feel good at our meetings. One of our biggest highlights was hosting the annual Northwest Municipal Clerks Dinner right here in Skokie with over 30 municipal clerks in attendance. And I featured it at Asion across the street, highlighting our beautiful village hall because it was at night and it was all lit up and everyone was parking across the street and they just loved that little walk over. Thank you to Mayor Tennis. She was one of my guest speakers, and our other guest speaker for the evening was Brad Cole from the Illinois Municipal League. We also supported the Start Your Day in Skokie program because traditionally at these dinners, they have a giveaway. So we handed out Skokie tumblers and showcased our community, encouraging our visitors who some of them are just nearby who had never visited downtown Skokie. So that was encouraging them to come back and explore some more. And the evening was a really big success. They all promised they were coming back and they really enjoyed the dinner, the downtown. The clerk's office budget remains flat again this year. We will continue to manage resources carefully while maintaining high level of service expected by our residents. And at the same time, the office continues to generate significant revenue for the village. This past year, we brought in nearly 2 million overall, including approximately 40,000 in passport fees, 1.5 million in transfer taxes, over 30,000 in administrative hearing fees, $22,000 in overdue parking violations, and more in additional collections. At the end of the day, even though we're a 2-person office, we're proud that we're able to maintain a high level of service and adapt to our residents' needs, finding ways to improve their overall experience. I have one more thing, that was just our office, and then I have one more thing that I was kind of researching. As part of the village's ongoing comprehensive fee review, they do it every so often. We've evaluated transfer tax related fees and processes administrated through the clerk's office. So I'm just gonna explain what a transfer tax is in Skokie because I think everyone doesn't always know. A transfer tax is a fee imposed by the village on the transfer of real estate ownership within Skokie. So when a property is sold or ownership changes, a transfer stamp must be obtained to document that the required tax has been paid or that the transaction qualifies for an exemption. So the current tax rate is $3 per thousand, or the consideration, which is a sale price. And the seller is responsible for payment of the transfer tax. So that's what we're doing with that. For an example, if a residential property in Skokie is sold for $300,000, the transfer tax would be $900, which is a $3 per thousand, or a fraction thereof, full consideration. Once paid, the village issues a transfer stamp, which is required before the deed can be recorded. So the review process, what we do in our office, is whether the request is for a taxable transfer or an exemption transaction, the clerk's office follows the same process, whether it's a sale or an exempt status. So we do a full property search review for any outstanding obligations, including unpaid or overdue water bills, parking or municipal tickets, code violations, administrative hearing fees, other outstanding balances owed to the village. And we also have to do a request for a final water reading with the water department, a pre-sale inspection for rental properties with the building department. And then all outstanding issues must be resolved and paid prior to issuing that transfer stamp, even for an exempt approval. Special circumstances and additional review in certain cases is for divorce or special circumstance transfers. The clerk's office reviews the legal documentation like a divorce decree to determine the amount of consideration that will be taxed. In some cases, it's not straightforward and I will need guidance. So I'll have Barbara kind of review what we need to do and how do we do it, and then she'll help me make those calls because there's a lot of legal in there. For high value transactions for properties, sales exceeding 1.5 million, a copy of the purchase contract might be requested by our office, and these transactions are reviewed by our finance director and Barb to help Deputy Corporation Counsel to kind of review that process on what is needed and what they're doing and make sure we don't miss anything. The review process is thorough and not a quick one-step procedure for either stamp for sales or an exempt. Sometimes people come in and just say, oh, well, it's exempt. Well, it still takes up a lot of time to process that request. Each application requires a detailed research, verification, and communication with multiple departments sometimes. So as part of this review, we analyzed transfer tax rates in comparable municipalities. Some communities have higher transfer tax rates than Skokie. Not looking to change the $3 per thousand, but the exempt transactions, this is currently $25. I believe many years ago, it was $15. It's been $25 for a long time, and we're seeing an increase in exempt transaction requests. Whether people are filing for divorce, or they're adding a spouse, taking off a spouse, putting it into land trust, or whatever they're doing with that ownership of the property. So the current fee structure has been in place for many years and presents an opportunity for review and evaluation. The exempt transaction fee is something that can be changed if the board chooses, reflecting the increase in requests and administrative work involved in processing those requests. I think it's time. After further comparison, we can propose an increase and for the exempt transaction fee for board consideration, and the transfer tax rate would remain unchanged. The $3 per thousand would remain the same. So that was my request for the fee increase. And just
So you
consideration.
don't have do you have a?
I don't yet. I'm still reviewing.
Before it comes.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
But our other municipalities are higher than we are.
So it'd be interesting to see a comparison
Mhm.
to the Northwest Municipal Conference. Maybe you can get that.
Yeah.
But the conference, they're into that survey as well.
Mhm.
Thank you for a comprehensive report. If any of you have ever been in this building during the day between 8:30 and 5, you walk by the clerk's office, there are always smiles there. Everybody is happy by the clerk's office. It's just you and Deputy Village Clerk Sylvia Roof work very hard to uphold that really strong level of customer service. So thank you. Do a great job down there. So
Thank you.
any questions for the village clerk? Trustee Robinson, did you have a question?
Well, I noticed, I don't have a question, but I noticed, is there an error here? We're looking on page 80. It has kind of the budget breakdown. But it has the village clerk and deputy clerk's compensation. So is that switch? Or is that correct?
It is.
It is correct.
So the prior village board voted to provide the clerk with an increase. And again, that, as we talked about before, there is a COLA, a cost of living adjustment, potentially applied to the clerk's position every year.
It started last year.
That started last year, right? But again, there's no capacity to change that until the next, 180 days before the next election cycle. Our deputy clerk has been here for many, many years.
Now, look at the longevity,
Right,
yeah.
so that's why
Yeah.
there's that difference. Trustee Shannon.
Well, thank you, thanks for your report, and it's great, all that you're doing, and the good reviews, and I'm just looking at some of these, the workload indicators here on page, I guess this is page 74 of the big budget. And just wondered about the number, like why the voter registration numbers have gone, like we're only projected 15.
Like I said, we're
Because
seeing,
they're going online.
they're going online, even when they come in, they'll ask how to do it and then we'll guide them. They prefer to get help from someone else, like a family member, a friend, to help them with their process. They're not trusting things getting to the clerk's office by mail. They want it definitely typed in and done immediately. And so we give them the option. They are able to do it in our office, but some of them choose, when they have the online option, they prefer to do that.
Do we ever do anything like in, like going to the 2 miles north and miles west?
So they already have people coming out there. When I was first appointed, I looked into that. They already have groups that come out there and do voter registration for both high schools.
Trustee Robinson.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think we did it again. I'm looking at the agenda, it's already almost this after 9.
Yeah.
I'm hoping. I mean,
I'm gonna go really fast. I'm zooming through.
I read really quick.
last time it was finance.
No, last time, you're talking about last year?
Yeah,
Oh, no, last year wasn't that. Last year it was the marathon trying to squeeze 11 board and commission.
Yeah,
members in the
yeah.
house. And we didn't talk about revenues.
yeah,
This year we talked about the revenues, so.
yeah, I just wanted.
Past your bedtime,
I'm sorry, I'm gonna sit on my hand.
Just wanted to notice.
trustee.
I just have one quick.
No, no apologies. That's what this is. for.
That's why I was trying to do quick reading.
Okay, trustee Bonnie Lee.
In all the planning of your budgeting, are we using any technology budget dollars to help? Maybe with some AI tools to help alleviate friction and reduce maybe
So
burden?
for minutes, we get a little bit of help, but I can't rely on it solely.
Sure.
Because it just picks up things that we don't need, and so it still takes time to go through it. There's nothing else I can really use AI
Yeah,
for.
everything's so.
It's very
everything's so
customer
service. right?
service
But
focused.
is there any like, not even AI, but any kind of digital tool that could help the office? I just inquired.
For me, no, for the residents, yes, that's why we're doing the online applications and to make it easier for them. Because like RTA still gives us applications. You have the option to do it online, but if you look at the 65+ crowd, it's hard for them.
Yeah.
How do I scan a document? They can barely send a text message sometimes. I'm helping them.
Yeah.
You know, it's difficult.
Do we have like resources down there, like a laptop and somebody can sit there and?
It takes a lot of time, trust me.
Yeah.
That's why I just end up doing it and they'll sit with me.
Yeah.
And I get the information.
Any other questions for village clerk?
I just want to say that
Trustee Iverson.
our clerk, as well as our mayor, you show up at so many things, and it's really exciting for people. They really appreciate it. It really represents us.
Spring greeting yesterday.
Tomorrow will be at Hubs.
Yes.
Every, thanks.
Trustee Iverson. Okay, Corporation Counsel's Office, Assistant Corporation Counsel Barbara Mangler. Page 40.
Deputy.
Deputy. Oh, pardon me. Deputy. She's been deputized.
I've been deputized. So, as you know, nothing has happened in my office in the last year. Absolutely not. Just kidding. As we all know, there have been some changes in the Corporation Counsel's office with the appointment and confirmation of Steve Elrod and as Corporation Counsel. And on behalf of myself, Jim McCarthy and Avi Funk, the other attorneys in the office, we have been very happy to welcome Steve and his team from Elrod Friedman, Stu Weiss, Marcus Martinez, and Kelsey Nola. Over the last several months, as you know, he was appointed in January, confirmed in January. We've developed a very good working relationship with the team. Steve and the team have been very forthcoming with communication and collaboration and responsiveness. And we certainly look forward to continue to grow that working relationship in this hybrid model that we have. So far it's going pretty good. Working out some bumps here and there and some adjustments, but it's really coming together. They're good people. And looking at the FY 27 budget, the corporation council budget in totality is relatively flat as compared to last year's budget, as the mayor had indicated previously that it would be. While it may seem on the face that the amount has increased due to the retainer for services for the LRAD agreement for the year, it actually has decreased in totality due to the elimination of the position of corporation counsel, which includes the salary, pension payments, and health insurance. So, while we've had the addition of multiple people to the team with LRAD Friedman and new members in the office who were telecommuting kind of zooming. The duties and responsibilities of the office really have not changed at all. And with that, the corporation counsel and the staff in the office, myself, the other attorneys, and Steve's team certainly advise the mayor and all the elected officials and the village manager. We do all the drafting of all the ordinances, resolutions for your consideration, and that involves working with other departments as well, especially on plan commission cases or code amendment cases or code amendment ordinances. We supervise or handle all the litigation that comes through involving the village, whether we are initiating that litigation or we are being sued for something. And this could be workers' comp, general liability, personal injury. And I think the village was updated on where we are in our litigation status thereof. We prosecute all traffic and code violation complaints that appear on our housing call in the Circuit Court of Cook County Second Municipal District. Our prosecutor, Avi Funk, he is one full day a week at the courthouse. Weekly, we have 4 traffic dates, 9, 10:30, and 1 o'clock. So basically it comes out to, he's gone one day a week at the courthouse at least. We administer all the administrative adjudication hearings, including building and health code violations, parking violations, seizure and impoundment, red light hearings. So we have staff that will go down and facilitate the agenda, work with the hearing officers. The only one we don't staff is the red light hearings. But we do all the paperwork before and after all the code hearings. And that is Erica in our office who does mostly that. We assist the mayor with the administration of the liquor license, as she alluded to earlier. And as she alluded to, we will be in the process of reviewing the liquor code to see if we can make any types of revisions. Our liquor code, everyone used to have a Class A license when I started here. Everybody had a Class A license except for the Legion Hall. And we went through a revamping of the liquor license, I want to say 2007, 2008, 2009. And that was administered by Mayor Van Dusen and our corporation counsel at that time, Pat Hanley. And then there was another review, I want to say in early teens to middle teens. And we incorporated certain commercial liquor districts at that time. So as the mayor alluded to, we continue to review, either we add or we create new different kinds of licenses to increase the economic diversity in the village. We continue on a daily basis to advise and collaborate with every department in this village, from finance to, as the clerk alluded to, I get the calls to look at the marriage documentary.
Yeah.
Police, fire, public works, community development, for sure, every day. I'm walking down the hall doing this, as is anybody else in our staff. We review or draft all the agreements and contracts involving the village. At any time, I have 10 to 15 agreements on my whiteboard that we're all going through every day. We administer the youth outreach call in coordination with the police department and the Health and Human Services. And I don't know if you noticed it, but on our indicators, the number of citations issues has gone down. And this is due to legislation that was passed that amended the school code that went into effect, I want to say last August. And we are prohibited from writing violations, ordinance violations on school property or anything associated with school activities. So the number of cases that we see has gone down, certainly through the school year it has gone down. Now, I anticipate unless all the kids are really, really good, we're gonna see more pickup during the summer months. So. We do all the real estate and honestly, anything that just walks in the door from my neighbor has a tree that's leaning over and can I get a good divorce lawyer or you never know what's gonna walk in. Looking forward to FY 27, I know Steve is working on doing more seminars for elected officials and staff with regard to FOIA. As the mayor had mentioned, we previously had one in February for yourselves, boards and commissions, chair. That was, I think, very well received. You know, in closing, the Corporation Council office deals with a large variety of issues on a daily basis. And with 3 in-house staff attorneys, 2 support staff, and of course, the welcome addition with Steve and his team. So I got through it quickly, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Trustee Kamani. Is there a reason why the prepared ordinances decreases by half?
That I can't tell you what the reason is. There might have been less plan commission activity. Our ordinances range from code amendments to general legislation to plan commission. We get a lot of our ordinances from plan commission. So if that number goes down, that's going to be reflected as well.
Any other questions, trustee Shannon?
Yeah, just looking at the numbers as well, I guess on page 88, and you're projecting, increased payments from, the code enforcement citations, big violations, red light. And I just wonder what's behind that? I mean, is it that we're.
So the code, I
Yeah,
didn't mean
yeah.
to jump to. So with code enforcement, we actually have been contemplating adding an additional code enforcement day during the month. And we've been talking about this with the manager's office and community development. There has been an increase in citations that are issued.
Good.
Yeah, so that's where some of that revenue is coming from. With regard to the red light, I think that's just a projected increase there.
Is there like also looking in the at the budget message 46 where talks about these pure numbers, is there sort of changes over time and how many of those are resolved? Because we're seeing how many adjudication, but how many actually end up being like, the problem solved or money was
So
paid.
I will say with the adjudications, especially with code violations, the building code violations with regard to, and also the health violations, our goal is always compliance.
Right.
Now, sometimes we may get compliance, but it's 3 or 4 months down the road. So there may be a late compliance fee because staff has had to go out multiple times to any location to do inspections. So
we did, it's just a matter of maybe when you're putting this together, like here we had, 1,379 administrative adjudication citations for code enforcement, and then maybe a parentheses 80% resolved or compliant. Yeah, I think it would just be helpful.
I think it would be interesting to have a
Sure.
compliance rate over time. We are moving towards, this corporation council, deputy corporation council meeting were said, we always want compliance But I think we're trying to get to compliance faster. I think there's an effort to get to that compliance quicker than maybe it's pretty fast. Trustee Robinson.
All right, I want to go back to the call. I know thank you for mentioning the laws changed.
Yeah,
Egregious behaviors that I see located on here, where a seat ticket could be given to a kid. The only one that's not really enforced by school is curfew.
Mhm.
But all the other ones, there's school code that can adjudicate those at the school level. So I'm curious to know, it's kind of what those violations were, how we supported them, not right now.
right.
But I'm just curious to know, just the impact, thinking about getting kids in a courtroom.
Right, so as you are aware, our goal in the youth enforcement call is primarily a diversion call. So our Anne Marie, who's doing our youth commission now, is our youth outreach coordinator, and she is wonderful. She will, in the past, has talked to the school, talked to the officer, spoken with the parents, sent them a letter. We try to do some kind of services for them, whether it's Metropolitan Family Services, or we need to come up with some kind of drug evaluation or independent assessment. And we look for whatever services that best fits the situation and the kid. And we do our best to support them. Sometimes it works, mostly it works. Sometimes it doesn't. So.
I used to say kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Iris. So
Things
yeah.
have changed.
things have changed.
Any other questions? Thank you for the report.
Of course.
What I think is important for the board to know is two things. One, to continue with this transition, we continue to we're keeping a close eye on all of the legal bills. So just know that those are being looked at very closely on a monthly basis. Thank the village manager for taking the lead on that. And also, Deputy Corporation Counsel Mangler talked about the interaction with all the departments. It's noteworthy that I've observed an increase in the interaction between the village manager's office and the corporation counsel's office, and that is a goal of this transition. So that is occurring, and I appreciate everyone's involved. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, finance.
Mayor, so I say this every year, I think you're sick of me by this sense, I'll keep it very brief. The finance department budget just crossed the 1.3 million mark. 1.1% increase from the prior year, 14,000 or so, 100% driven by step raises for employees in the step loan. I'll just note a couple of things we accomplished this prior year. We were very involved with IT in the transition of our ERP from on-site server side to essentially cloud-based. It was a process that we anticipated would be complex. It ended up being a little more complex than we thought. We completed that successfully through March, and we still have some kinks to iron out currently, but that took a great part of late winter and planning, and then most of the early spring to complete it. We've been working diligently to target vehicle sticker scofflaws. You may be aware that the police department's approach when they encounter our residents has been a lot more with focus on positive interactions, which has led somewhat to a reduced not enforcement action, but a reduced proactive action on these minor, parking citations type violations. We picked up the slack and looking at doing this from the office, essentially comparing our data with the Secretary of State and sending out targeted enforcement notices to particularly large companies that buy, 100 or 200 vehicle stickers. And we've been successful in increasing that vehicle sticker revenue line
for the first time in many years, just through these targeted enforcement efforts. So it hovered at about just 1.65 for many years. We've crossed that 1.7 million mark this year, so just over 100,000 in revenue. Looking forward to this next year. Again, we got a lot of work to do with community development in both the short-term rental implementation, which again includes a tax component, the housing fund implementation, and how that plays out. We are currently working to change payment processors for online business tax portal. We anticipate, hopefully, to achieve 6 digits savings in the cost. So part of the credit card fee savings we may achieve through that business tax portal that we're working to hopefully implement in the early months of the fiscal year. Otherwise, that's it for finance. I'm also here to cover other funds which primarily include those pension funds, fire, police, IMRF, the self-insurance fund, and so on. We talked a little bit about the other funds through the revenue discussion. Just for clarification, what you see in other funds for expenses are the program benefit payments. So even though there's a separate board that determines benefit administration, the village is ultimately on the hook to pay those benefits, and those must be budgeted funds in our finance. So the fire pension fund, police pension funds, and municipal retirement are actual planned out benefit payments for the first two, and then assessments from the IMRF for the third fund. Increases in those funds are directly related to a 3% annual COLA. The state required 3% annual COLA in both fire and police, and IMRF pensions for that matter. And then the projections we make on what new retirements we anticipate for this coming year. General obligation bonds, also part of other funds. Typical to expect a little bit of increase. Normally, this is very steady compared to the amount. The increase is usually a little bit more principal here, a little bit less interest, or the other way around, but this is a fairly flat geo debt year-over-year budget. With that, I'll stop and open it up for questions.
Questions for Finance Director Kennedy about his report of Finance Department, which thank you. Thank you, and thanks to your staff. They have a lot of face time with residents, and yeah, we appreciate what they do in terms of providing customer service. Yes, Trustee Schechter.
First, it's a very minor thing. I'm in the on page 54 of the budget. Whatever the budget.
The message.
Yes. Don't we do 26 payrolls and 24? Because it says on number 18. I was looking at that, I'm like, I think we do 26.
Number this 26 payrolls, you write 24 vouchers. Yes, that's
what it's worth.
Yeah.
Good catch. Yeah. And then, yeah, and then, yeah, just many thanks. And when we start looking at the housing fund, I, look forward to sort of your input on that, like, if the fund, because when we talk to the committee as a whole, having a fund that maybe people could make contributions to voluntarily, or however we do that. Availing of your answer.
Other questions? Hey, thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is public comment, which we had that earlier. So now I'd ask for a motion to go into closed session to talk about personnel. John, is that? Well, wage and benefit, but that falls under the personnel section. I'm so rich. I see a second from your partner down there, Trustee Robinson.
Section 2, paragraph C2, request to discuss wage and benefit.
Okay, moved by Trustee Levy, seconded by Trustee Pete Robinson. Comments, questions? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Trustee Pierce-Lovan is absent. Trustee Schechter.
Aye.
Trustee Kimani Levy.
Aye.
Trustee Robinson.
Aye.
Trustee Iverson.
Aye.
Trustee Lisa Levy.
Aye.
Mayor Tennis.
Aye, and the motion is in approved, so we will go into the session.